Alright, we good. Ready? So nobody else here play drum. We got another drum. Somebody scared to play drums?
Oh, he's brother in a hat, man.
Yeah, he got the drummer look, man. Ready? You want to do this one first?
I can get off here.
You want to use this one first? You going to use this one first?
Yeah.
Okay.
I use one first, man. Oh boy, let's switch.
Yeah, do this one first and then we'll switch up. Alright, so if you got an instrument, shake something loose, alright, ready? Alright. I hope that gets everybody. Yeah, let's collect those. We're going to do that at the end too for a few minutes. Put those on there. We'll leave them over there. Sophie, give me some water. Alright, so what we're going to talk about tonight, alchemy, metaphysics. Now the reason why I do that before is sound and vibration. Sound and vibration is pretty much the key to understanding harmonics, and the universe is actually governed on music when you really understand the science of it. Vibration, sound, and frequency, as I've talked about this in pretty much any culture you deal with, there's always some type of ritual that involves using the method of sound and vibration. If it's mantras, it's done with the voice in certain tones and frequencies. You'll find amongst, for an example, amongst the Yoruba, if it's bimbes, drumming sessions for the Orishi, there's certain patterns and rhythms that are played to bring down what they call the Orishi, the spirits, in ancestral gatherings, misas, or things for the Oguns, whatever culture you're coming from. It's an important element. We lack that element in a lot of what we do because we've been now programmed artificially by fake music. Sound and vibration is powerful because all we have to do is look at the youth and see how they're captured by music, okay? And unfortunately, not in a good way, because it's teaching most of our kids now to be derelicts. You know, they're looking at they're looking at a lot of these entertainers and rappers, and this is where they're getting unfortunately, their role model from. And they're trying to emulate these guys. And I'm not saying there's no positive rappers out there, but most of the positive rappers don't get any positive feedback, media, attention no more. Those days are gone. So the kids are easily, for lack of a better word, in a negative aspect, taken to a place where we kind of got to get them reconnected. Now, this is why in this day and time, unfortunately, it's hard to reach some of the youth because they don't, the stuff that's being offered on the surface level doesn't appeal to them anymore. Because this is a generation, these kids that are coming up now, they're warriors. They won't hesitate twice, and I say this on a good and a bad level, to take your life. So we need to connect with that element on that, and they don't see themselves in anything that's going on right now. So it's up to us, we're the ones that got to bring them something that they can relate to. Now, what I'm trying to get at, I hear a lot of people, and I keep talking about this the last 2 months, there's a lot of over-intellectualizing going on the internet. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, yes, that is annoying. Yes. No, it is blind. Light blind, brother, light blind. I better. It's great. I'm not the type of person, I want to make it clear, this is not a lecture on how great you were back in Egypt. That's not the class for you. This is not a lecture about, I'm going to sit there and stroke and caress your ego so you can leave here finding excuses such as the Caucasian or the white man to blame for all your problems. This is not this type of lecture. History is great in the sense to instill pride in you. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm finding out is I hear a lot of people saying ancient Egypt this, and they're talking about the deities. So I simply ask a question. For an example, I had a brother giving me this whole historical breakdown on Tahuti, and I simply asked him, can you invoke the spirit of Tahuti? And he looked at me like I was crazy. Reading is good, but it's only going to get you so far. By all means, I'm not telling you to read. I'm not telling you to study, because books is where you get your surface information. It's a guide, or it's a roadmap for you to create. The purpose of this class is to create your own magical system that works for you. Okay? Now, what I mean by that is, if you took a magical system, per se, a basic book on magic, all right, and say it was candle magic, or say it was chakra magic, okay, and you followed that book to the letter or to the T. Now, what tends to happen is you're taking on the essence of the individual that wrote that book, or that created that system, so you're not creating your own path. What this is about is creating your own path. Now, there is no right or wrong way. There's many formulas that are in place that support itself that one can use to create that own path. I had somebody ask me on a radio show the other night, well, what does it mean if I've never read a book, per se, historically on Egyptian magic, but created my own system? My answer to that person was, that means you're a god, because you created your own path. Whereas if you took a book and followed it to the T, you're taking on the essence of the person that wrote that book. That's not creating your own path. So this is about creating. People keep asking, when is the change going to come? This is the question we've been asking for over 20 years in the Latino community, in the black community, amongst melanated people, period. When is the change going to come? Well, change is not going to come until we make the change happen ourselves. All right, now you see more fear being played on your psychic emotions with this para stuff now. This is all being done intentionally. Okay? I said, if you're part of the experiment, you're affected by an emotion. And I say this with all due respect. That stuff doesn't bother me, because it's part of the process that's playing out if you are the scientist controlling the experiment. If you are part of the experiment, then you're being controlled by your emotions, and the number one tool they control your emotions with is what? Fear. Now this is being done, again, intentionally, because we take that incident for an example, and I don't want to dwell on it too long. The mass media likes to publicize it. Now, they've been unclear. I don't know how the death toll went from 90 to 155 back down to 129. So you got to pay attention to the way they feed you the information, okay? Now, we know that there's an agenda in place for the mentally weak. This is all just systems of control. Even though we might think physical slavery is over, mental slavery is still strong. It's going hard, and there's still many systems in place, because forget just the physical aspect. If I can control your thoughts, I can control your emotions. So we got to free ourselves from that mental bondage that we all suffer from, called fear. You understand? And how do we do that? We have to create our own magical systems. What is magic? Real magic is manipulating the subconscious mind. I want to get out of your mind all these Hollywood concepts and ideologies. When you hear the word black magic, the dark arts, alchemy, metaphysics, the ignorant will hear those terms and all of a sudden label it negative with the occult world, etc. That's not what we're talking about. Get the Hollywood stuff out of your mind. We're talking about going into the inner depths of the subconscious mind and working with that energy that exists there. Nothing exists outside of yourself. Henceforth, we'll back up. We go into the 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti. Let's talk about that real quick. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand, because you know me, I can talk. I don't want to talk you guys to sleep, but I can. The 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti. Who knows the first principle of Tahuti? I told y'all you should really be studying this stuff. This is key. What's the first? Was it what? No, the first principle is what? The principle of
Mind.
Okay. What is the phrase they use?
Mind is all.
All is mental, and the mental all is mind. All is mental, and the mental is all. Now, if you study the 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti, and you go into the emerald tablets of Tahuti, right? The biggest mistake we can do as individuals is to go outside of ourselves and look for the Creator. This is what Tahuti was saying. And he also states, when he's having the conversation with the Sem priesthood, or the Egyptian priesthood, in the emerald tablets of Tahuti, he's saying, when we name God, by doing that, we create other gods. Okay? So here's the problem. When everybody starts taking an aspect of something that you can't define and starts to call it Jehovah, or Allah, or Yahweh, or Elohim, or God, or Jesus, what you're doing, you're creating the separation factor. You understand? It doesn't exist outside the mind. Now, it might be hard for some people to grasp that and go, wait, because now our mind starts to backtrack and go, well, how did I get here? How was I created? How did I come into existence? Who's controlling this scheme of things? That's the power and the spell of religious slavery. Because anytime you think that there's some mystical force that's seated in heaven pulling the strings on everything, you're part of the experiment. You're not controlling it. Okay? That's the objective of tapping into what we call mental alchemy of the mind and spiritual magic. Okay? It starts there. Okay? Anybody have any questions before we move on? Anybody have any questions on anything? Were you gonna ask a question earlier? No. Or just a light? Okay. Is everybody clear to this point? Everybody's good? All right. In dealing with I'm going to focus just for a few minutes on the 7 Hermetic principles. Let's talk now about, we know the first principle being the all is mental, the mental is all. Let's talk about now the doctrine of vibration and rhythm. This is key to breaking many of the illusions that we suffer from too. All right. Another concept that's hard, I see a lot of people leaving, per se, that came up through levels of learning, say we were born and raised a Muslim, a Christian, or a Jew, or some form of monotheism. What tends to happen is we leave that way of thinking, for an example, and then say we come in to the West African studies of the Yoruba, or we come into the studies, the spiritual consciousness of ancient Egypt. All right? We take with us the same monotheistic mindset. this is where we make a mistake too. We start taking the Egyptian deities, which I said before are archetype energies that exist in the subconscious mind. Stop worshiping them as if they're literal deities. Because what tends to happen is we're doing the same thing we did in monotheism when we're glorifying a mythological character called Jesus, and now we're doing it, say, to Horus. And I hear people saying Ra, the Most High. Now my question is, and people get mad, what is the Most High? Well, the Most High. The Most High of what? Where is the Most High? Well, you know, the Most High. This is a person that claims not to be religious. This is a person that claims deityship and says that he or she says they're a god or a goddess is another term that so floats around loosely now. I'm a god, I'm a goddess. And I just simply ask a basic question. Well, what does that represent and really mean to you? Because when you're saying things like the Most High, Ra, the Most High, you know, to me that shows subconsciously on the subconscious mind has been severe trauma that you haven't addressed. Because just because you leave one way, say per se Christianity, and now you claim to be an Egyptian mystic, but have you left that thinking fully behind? Most people you're going to find out the answer is no, whether they're conscious of it or not. I'm bringing this point up because this is part of the reason why we can't, for lack of a better word, take it to that next level, take it to that next step. We get stuck in these ruts because subconsciously we're not saying we still want to follow stuff, we still want to worship things, but we claim that this is not what we want. But our behavior dictates otherwise. Okay? Another thing, and a good book to check out, is Don Webb, Overthrowing the Old Gods. And in there he says for people that follow swamis and gurus exclusively, it doesn't mean you can't have a teacher, an elder, that's not what I'm saying. But when you exclusively disconnect yourself from everything else in the universe and you get trapped into one ideology or you just get trapped under one individual's way of thinking or thoughts, what tends to happen is now you submit to the will of that individual, number one. Number two, by deifying that human, you've magnetized their faults. So if something goes wrong, which most of these gurus usually get exposed for what they are, then the student spends their life trying to defend the guru because you became subjected to the will, okay? So following things outside of ourselves, there has to be a point where that's cut off because you have to take the journey yourself. Nobody can do it for you. It doesn't mean you can't have help along the path, but I keep telling people there comes a point in that journey where you have to stop holding the hand of somebody. And people are like, well, what do you mean? There's no book where you're going to open up and all the secrets of the universe are going to be revealed to you. It takes meditation. It takes intense study. It takes intense visualization. There's a multitude of rituals that go along with it. Mantras, tones. All this is important if you really want to understand what this is really all about. It's not about just sitting back and read. Anybody can read 100 books on Egypt and spit a bunch of regurgitated, rehearsed, memorized information on Egypt. It's deeper than that. Okay? Anybody have any questions to this point? I know somebody's got some questions. No? Everybody's good? Everybody's clear? All right. Let me find that book. Let's go through that real quick. Actually, I can get it on my phone. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to go around the room. Just so, and it's not to, we're not putting nobody on the spot. I just want everybody to get a perception level of where people's ways of thinking are. All right, just a brief definition. When I say to you the dark arts or black magic, what's the first couple of thoughts that come to your mind? Brief, you don't got to get in detail. You can go first. If I say the dark arts, black magic, what comes to your mind? What's the first feeling you get? Voodoo. Okay. Sister Sonia, first thing that comes to your mind. Or an emotion you feel. Nothingness?
No, I don't feel.
You don't have an immediate response. The mind's trying to grasp the concept, or are you thinking too hard?
No. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's true. You can't eat, and that's true. All right, we'll skip you and go to your brother. What's
I
first?
think esoteric occult.
Okay. All right.
And it made me feel good.
Good. That's what I want. I want to get that part too. What about you, young brother?
I'm not really sure.
You're not really sure. You're wrestling with it. Okay. What about you, brother Yehuda?
Well, I changed, so I can say it was like evil at first.
Correct.
But now it's a powerful spiritual knowledge of sin.
Okay. You, Paulo.
Yeah, similar thing. In the past, it would give you like trepidation, like fear. But once you know what it really is, you know, You realize
Okay.
that dark and occult, all that means is hidden.
Correct. Greek word for hidden. Good. What about you, young brother? Magical. Sis, right next to you. What comes to your mind? First thought. Could be one word, two words. Just brief. Still searching? All right, you're trying to. I'm not even gonna ask Tiger. Pierre, what comes to your mind? Anything when you hit it? Sorcery. Okay. Brother, what comes to your mind?
Exploring the subconscious
I like that. There you go. I like that. Elder brother sitting down over there. I know. You don't got to tell me, but I kind of know. I know where you're at. I want you to, not so much for me, but for the people. Just one thought that comes to your mind. Okay. Okay.
And it's just a play on words like how they've done in the dictionary. Whenever they try to make something look bad, they'll put dark. Just like the dark continent, chocolate cake is devil food.
Correct.
It's the same thing that's going on.
All right, the two brothers in the back. What comes to your mind, Elder? Anything? Piecing it? Okay, nothing in particular. Okay. Well, nothingness is actually a state of supreme balancement, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, takes you to the light. Light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Remember, in order to have organization, you got to have chaos and confusion first. Okay? Now, I'm going to bring up in reference symbolically of the deity Set, or Satuk. They called Set the chaotic deity back in ancient Egypt. Those that are not familiar with the concept of Set, it's always portrayed as he's some type of devil figure or some negative type of being. When really Set represents the inner workings of our subconscious mind, because Set was the only one that had the balls to question mainstream. Okay? Set was basically saying, no, I'm creating my own path. And he went against the establishment. Because remember, we did a whole thing on the Star Wars trilogy, the Sith and the Jedi Knights. People don't really know what the dark side is. Because you hear dark side, you hear chaos. So all of these negative definitions that have been thrown out there over the years circulate. Not per se against with everybody in here. But why I did that and went around the route takes us to the next principle of vibration. Okay, and rhythm. We went around the room, everybody had, some people said nothing in particular came, which is actually something, because in order to have nothing, you have to have the sum of a thing, you have to have nothing first. There's a science in that. So you guys were going into the inner depths of your subconscious minds, the ones that were not able to really come up with anything. So you were going as far back as you could into the depths of your mind to come up with an explanation. That in itself is powerful if you really understand the science of that. Then there was people that gave terms that might have been more experienced and maybe have been studying this information. Some said, use the terms magical, powerful. Brother over here said it felt good, etc. I can't remember each and every one of them. Say it again, hidden. Somebody said hidden. These are all right, and none of them are wrong, vice versa. What we just saw was the principle of vibration manifested when we were all doing that. Because everybody tapped into it differently. This is the same concept when we eliminate the good and bad concept. There's no such thing. It's the way somebody perceives the information and the level of the vibration that they tap into. So if I say something that might appear good to me, somebody else might interpret it as negative to them, and vice versa. Somebody might say something to me that they think within themselves that, oh, that's negative to me, but that may not be negative to me. This is the doctrine of vibration that we have to understand in relationship to work in alchemy and spiritual magic, especially mental magic. Okay? Because knowing this science, one that's in tune with that, one's going to be able to take themselves to higher states of consciousness. Okay, they're not going to get trapped in that system of control. They're not going to get trapped by person, place, and thing. Most people identify God with a person, place, or thing, and this is where the problem comes in.
So what about self? Like, as I answered the question before, if you see something that's, put it this way, bad, and then afterward you see the same thing as you good.
Okay, but now we have to understand the situation and what governed that situation, because what you're terming as bad or good, again, to you, at one incident where you termed it bad, and then all of a sudden the next, you might have seen it again and termed it good, there's a certain situation that governed that, what made your vibrational frequency change. All right, let me give you an example, and then I'll get you. Say we walked out front right now, right, to show you how vibration frequency works. And say we walked out front and there was some dude on top of another dude pounding him. The first thing that's going to come to mind is we're going to think the dude on top is the aggressor, and he's the one that's at fault. We're going to automatically think that because we see the dude on the ground getting pummeled. But what we didn't take into consideration, the dude laying on the ground might have tried to do something and take that person's life, and that person was defending themselves. The mind registers, and energy, we know emotions are just energy and motion. We tap into vibrations on frequencies 90% of the time based on how we react. Not proactive. Most people are reactionary based on this eye and not pineal, activating that correct frequency. Let me give you another example. How do you know that that's true? When we stop looking with this and sensing with this, when you walk into a room, you might go to a party or a place, and what do we say? Oh man, the vibe here is good, it's popping. So you didn't see nothing, you felt it. Same thing, you might walk into a spot and go, oh man, it doesn't feel right here. So that vibration is constantly working within you when we start reacting on that. So that would be one explanation. Now, the other thing is going to be personal, because the first time you saw it, the experience that it impacted you, it made your mind decipher that it was negative to you. Now, that becomes personal. Only you know the answer to that at that point of impact. Now, the second time you saw it, more than likely the first experience with it kind of clarified maybe the fears, misinformation or doubts you had about it. So that could be the reason why the second time around you didn't react that way. You didn't feel like it was negative. Because now you gain the experience of it. Now, this is the one thing, we're afraid to experience new things. So this is one explanation. We can sit here and debate about this in a multitude of ways, though. Sure.
No, I was just gonna say, you talking about rhythm and vibration, but it sounds like you talking about the law of polarity, the law of duality, all at one.
Well, it's all connected, because that's the next principle we're about to get to. The next principle, the Hermetic principles, is when we deal with the doctrine of correspondence, as they call it. As above, so below, as within, so without, which takes us, as I mentioned last time, the Baphomet symbol, which is another symbol that people falsely and incorrectly, because they have no knowledge of it, they correlate it to your modern day Satanists or your modern day devil worshippers. That was something that they adopted into their false system. Remember, Satanism or devil worship was created by people that were anti-Judaic and Christian. So it was a system they created anti to that. It has nothing to do with us. Baphomet predates that. It has nothing to do with that. This is something they adapted. Baphomet is not an actual deity. Stop getting that if that's in your mind. That's false. Baphomet is a symbol that represents higher states of your consciousness. Because look at what it represents. As I explained before, it has the male goat face of a man. Some call it the goat of Mendez. It has the female breasts of a female. And that basically represents masculine and feminine forces, as we talked about. It has the one hand pointing up. What? The one hand what? Pointing down, as above, so below. Correct? It has on it all four elements. The main four elements. When you look by the pineal gland, you see the kundalini rising. It has the chakra with the flame or the fire shooting from its forehead. Correct? By the abdomen, you see the scales, which represent the water. It's perched on the earth, which represents the earth element. And then it has the wings, which represents the air element, right? And we know a goat is what? Always perched up high on a mountain, because it likes to be above its subjects, which represents you, higher states of consciousness. It also has inscribed on its arm in Latin a term which simply means a transferring or alchemical state from one state of existence to another. This is just a symbol that represents higher states of consciousness. So when one would focus on the Baphomet consciousness, it would focus on those aspects and what it represents. So when you see the symbol, if you're thinking, oh, that's devil worship, that's negative, then you are part of the experiment. You're not controlling it. Go ahead. I'm going to get the tiger in a minute. Go ahead.
So that means a higher state of consciousness, right?
Correct.
But when you watch like YouTube and they're using it and
For devil worship, yeah?
they correlate it with the Illuminati, and they're showing the one eye and one world government as if it's Satanism. And then also I want you to go back to what you were saying about Seth and chaotic and all that.
Correct. Now remember, when you say we're saying loose terms like they, the Illuminati. Let's break the myths in that word too. Illuminati. When you go back into your Bible, for an example, people that believe in that, I take them to this. If you go into your Bible, if you go into Revelations 22 verse 16, and you go into Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12, it correlates the devil Lucifer as the sun and morning star, and Jesus as the sun and morning star as the root of David. Now I bring that up because what God are they really worshiping in the Bible when Lucifer and Jesus are given the same title in the same book? That's number one. when they're using these symbols of the one eye, and you'll see the Go to Mendez, on most of those depictions, pay attention to one thing. They always portray the Go to Mendez, they always leave the androgynous aspect out, the female breasts. Pay attention to that. You'll see it. Not the Eliphas Levi interpretation that most people have, because that's, every time I talk to somebody, that's the main explanation I get on what Baphomet is, because they read Eliphas Levi's book, but it goes deeper than that. Now, the whole thing with the Illuminati, the Knights of Templar, or the Knights of Templar, they worship Baphomet in their temple. They worship the head of Baphomet. This is something, again, that because they knew the magical principles of what Baphomet represented, they incorporated it into their magical systems. Now, everything that we're saying is after the fact. The Illuminati, what we would call Satanist orders, this is something that only goes back 300, 400, 500 years. The whole representation of Baphomet, when you deal with the Ogdoads, you deal with the sea creatures, androgynous beings, this goes back to Egypt, on back into Dravidian culture, which we falsely call Hindu culture, because we know the Dravidians had a strong connection with the West Africans. When you look at the ancient Dravidians, they basically were Africans with straight or wavy hair. Now, what you see today is a product of people in Egypt and those regions, obviously, that were mixed. We're not looking at original people no more. So we're taking it back to those times. All this stuff you're seeing on the internet and YouTube and Jay-Z's and the Illuminati and Beyonce, that's all hype to feed off of people's emotions. You understand? So they're taking a symbol and now they're twisting it to represent what they want to portray to the masses. Okay? So when somebody says to me, well, the Knights of Templar, they worship Baphomet in their temples, my simple response is, other than the fact that you read that in books, how do you know that? Well, you don't. It's the same thing when people will blow you off, whether, and I'm telling you this from experience, it could be being a Mason, it could be being a Rosicrucian, it could be being initiated into the Yoruba mysteries. People say, well, that's all bullshit. Based on what? What you read in a book? Or are you basing it on the experience? And then people will blow it off and say, well, that's all white people stuff. Really? Give me in specific, what about it is all white people stuff? For an example, I'll use the Rosicrucian order. There's several of us in this room that are Rosicrucians. Right? And I'll say, well, tell me on the third temple degree, what's bullshit about it? Or I don't know. Then you don't know what you're talking about. If you don't have the experience. Reading about it is one thing. Seeing it on YouTube is one thing. But experiencing it is a whole nother thing.
But if you think about it too as well, it's like growing up, this is kind of stuff that they kind of, your parents and churches be like, don't look at this type of stuff. This is devilish stuff, you know. But it's true. It's because it's like, if they keep you from going through that experience, you'll never see these things. Like I grew up in a household where I wasn't supposed to like deal with that type of stuff. But when I really looked at the symbology of everything, I was just mind blown. Like it was deep, man. You know.
I was just telling Brother Tiger, man, I know he wants to say something, that I've been finding out that everything we were told to stay away from is actually everything we need. You're gonna find that out as you keep going. Go ahead, Brother Tiger.
I wanted to just interject a little bit about what you were talking
Sure.
about creation of gods.
Mm-hmm.
So on the flip side, but a very relevant side, whenever faction puts out a symbol of Baphomet and puts energy behind making people think a certain way or feel a certain way about that symbol,
Right.
what should also be considered is the fact that they have knowledge, so the symbol becomes a talisman. So
Excellent.
in other words, people's energy feeds into the symbol, but someone has knowledge above the symbol that's using that energy for their agenda. So the God is created. It's not that it's not created. There's a deity there.
Right.
But the deity has a master and is put forth for a reason to harvest energy.
Correct.
Because energy is the currency that builds reality. So what you're looking at is that particular paradigm going on with all of these symbols.
Right.
And at the end of the day, what the brother's saying is absolutely correct.
But it's kind of crazy because they're using dark arts against you. It's like you're really seeing like.
That's
how
right.
they're playing out.
But you heard what Brother Tiger said. You heard the last part. They're charging it with their own personal energy. Now I want to go to talismans. That's what's creating the deity aspect of it. So like you said, if the Illuminati aspect, what they put into it or charge it with, it's the same thing if you're doing candle magic. You're charging the candle with your personal energy so you can bend the will or the force to work for you as opposed to against you. Now, it's the same thing when we talk about sigis, symbols, or talismans. Let's talk about that real quick. I'm glad that comes up. I'll find most people will buy symbols, and we just had a brief conversation about this earlier. Will find symbols store-bought, they'll order it on Amazon or whatever, and they'll just throw it around their neck. That's the worst thing you can do. Because we shouldn't wear a symbol just because we like it, we should charge that talisman with our own personal energy. It should be cleansed. There should be invocations said over it, and you should charge it with your own personal energy, because then like Brother Tiger said, now you're wearing it, and now you're charging it with what it's intended to be, which it's actually you're charging the higher self. That's working for you now. It's a venue or a tool one can use for obtaining a higher state of consciousness. So you shouldn't just wear a symbol just because I like the way it looks. Now I asked most people, I said, did you take that to your sacred space? Did you clean it? Did you charge it? Did you say your own personal invocation over it before you put it on? I'm bringing that up because it ties into the same thing with the Baphomet symbol. So what I'm saying is, and another point that he brought up is very important. The ones that have higher levels of understanding or understanding of it, it takes on a whole different meaning. So that's key to understand too. We got to get to that point, so then we don't get trapped in the theories of that. Go ahead, brother.
All right. I don't want to digress, but I do want to add this.
No. Go ahead.
Here's your biggest talisman right here. All right. This has been created to trap your energy. All right. It's totally knowledge based. So every point of this, of course, this is not a room with novices to the point that I have to go into the symbols on here. Y'all know, and I've seen all kinds of stuff on this.
Right.
But the interpretation of those breaking stuff down on YouTube or whatever is not necessarily fully correct. Like you said, you got to go in for this stuff.
That's right.
And when you go in, you realize, all right, this is a coin that's been made into paper, right? Because you have two sides of a seal that they call the Great Seal, but it's not. So it's a coin. So initially, this is a transference of a coin to paper.
Right.
And then the symbols are specific because initially the coin transferred currency. That's why it was called currency.
That's right.
So now we're handling the paper in between, and the symbols are there specifically to trap your energy.
That's right.
So now the energy's in the symbol, and you don't know how to get it out, but they do. So now they're going to use that. And how much energy is being built in this thing? So the gift that I'm giving you tonight is stop using this.
Yeah.
How? It's like easier said than done. There are ways, and we'll talk about that. I want to do a lecture with my man here because I feel like we can bring something to the table and we're going to discuss that. But that needs to stop, because what you're doing is empowering the same system that you're complaining with.
That's right.
It's only running off of your co-signing.
Right.
And we have to find ways around it.
And I'm glad you bring that up too, because remember briefly, we'll get you in one sec. We briefly had talked about that, and remember you brought it up about the money thing. Mm-hmm. Where does money have its place in consciousness or spirituality? Well, that's going in a little bit deeper. When we understand how we can make that work for us and not be trapped by it, because the symbols, we all know the symbols on there. We see the pyramid on there. We see the all-seeing eye. There's a lot of other symbols really embedded in the design. But again, these are symbols or sigis. It works same way, where you can use sigis and symbols to work for you. But if you don't understand them, we're getting binded by this. And this is what we talked about, because I'm glad the brother brought that up last month right here, the brother in the front, that there seems to be money's not firmly established in its place in consciousness. Because let's be real, even in the conscious community, you got people chasing the paper dollar. Because I hear all these people talking about unity, but yet they got their own little splinter group. I go on, and it's not to knock them, but I go on to the House of Consciousness, and within the House of Consciousness, they're talking about unifying, but all of them got their own little separate groups. That confuses me. The same thing, like the brother said, the same thing you're trying to get out of is the same thing subliminally you're promoting. You understand? That has to stop in order for us to go to that next level.
All right, then since he brought up that situation about to not let the money trap you,
right?
But to have control over it, or not use it. I mean, we have to use it in today's society because that's what they use as currency. So how is it that we can't use it but still function?
Well, we were talking about that earlier. There is a way.
That's one, and two is you didn't finish what you were saying about Seth and him being chaotic versus.
Okay, we'll go back to that. On the money thing, and I think me and the brother are going to get together and go in depth. I'm just going to give you something brief. Remember, there was ways we were able to survive or exchange what we call commerce without ever exchanging paper. Right, but no, it can happen during this time. But there's a way that it has to happen. Not no fictitious, illusional way. You remember the barter system, right? Yeah. You remember before there was even coinage, if you had a service or a good that I needed, and I had something, we would barter. That would be one way. Right. It goes deeper than that. I'm just giving you basic for now. But what tends to happen is, I'm sure everybody in this room has a skill. I'm sure there might be a barber in this room, an electrician, correct? There might be somebody here that might be an attorney, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. 90% of us are paying for these services, okay, with this paper money that Brother Tiger is talking about. So not only now we're giving fuel to the very system that's actually we claim we're trying to rise up against. It's the same thing. Let me give you this metaphor. When people leave religious mind states and then they come into consciousness, but they still look at the deities, for an example, from a monotheistic mindset. It's the same thing. You're basically leaving one religion and now you're creating another form of your religion, but you just sprinkled it with Afrocentricity. You sprinkled some black stuff around it, and now you think you're not in a slave mind state no more. This is the illusion that people create. So we're going to expound more on that. I'm going to get with him. We're going to even go a little bit more detailed because it's believe me, it's a lot more intricate than that. That's a great question, though. Right. How do we do it? Because the reason why you're asking that question, we're thinking from a surface mentality. Because the average person is going to say, I need this paper because if I got to go grocery shopping, if I don't have it on my debit card, if I don't have the paper, I can't put gas in it. You got a valid point. And by no means am I not hearing what your concern is. But believe me, there is a way to get out of the matrix, for lack of a better word, and break that matriarchal system that they have over us under this illusion. Because symbols do house energy. The dumbest shit that I just heard, and I couldn't believe how dumb it was, and people entertained it, when this old Uncle Tom, Ben Carson, made the statement that, now there's a reason why he said it, that the pyramids were built to store grain. I don't know if anybody heard that.
He said that?
He said, and he's the most spooked out Christian you can ever be, but to sit there and enforce that ideology on the masses, and for anybody to agree with that, it's that simple. Now, why did he use the pyramid? He took you to the pyramid for a reason. I'm going to let you marinate on that for a minute. But there's a reason. It can be done, but I think we need to devote that's something that, it's not a one-answer question session. I think we need to do a whole topic.
I mean, on that. To say something like that, I don't want you to think that there's no,
Well, it's not even just that.
Right.
Look at who they had said it. Look at what he represents and why they chose the symbol of the pyramid. And go even in deep on what grain represents. Okay? Because he believes it's the dumbest shit I ever heard. He believes because Joseph was in bondage by the Egyptians and Joseph's family went into Egypt because when they were starving they went there for food. So he believes that that's because of Joseph. Meditate on, now you gotta even go deeper on who really Joseph was and what that whole story represented back in Egypt, because we know there was no Israelites. There's no records anywhere in ancient Egypt that records any group of people called the Israelites being in bondage for 430 years. But it does record a group of people called the Shepherd Kings, the Hyksos. They were in bondage in Egypt for 430 years, right? Now I want you to look this up. They have a being called Thutmose I, who was a pharaoh of ancient Egypt, right? And he was responsible for upkeeping what they call the Kaffa inside the pyramid, which would be the same thing as the Ark of the Covenant in your fictitious Bible. When you read the story of Thutmose I, he gathered an army to drive these invaders, these Indo-Aryan Hyksos invaders, out of Egypt. It's the same identical story to your Moses story and the Israelites. Also look this up, and I'll tell you why they're doing this. Get an Oxford annotated Bible for research purposes. Go into the back, and in the back, you'll see in what they call the section of the essays, all the major biblical scholars are giving their theories on who the Israelites were. They all come to the conclusion that they're in agreement. It's more than likely that they were the Hyksos that came into Egypt, because there's no archaeological or historical findings of any group of people called the Israelites. This is something that was self-created after the fact. They have never found the Ark of the Covenant. There's rumors today the Knights Templar have it, or the Philossians in Ethiopia have it. Where is it? They've never found Noah's Ark. Now, why every year do they feel it necessary to put a religious movie out? There's always, how many times are they going to tell you the Moses story, the Noah story? They keep doing this systematically, and then depending on the time of the year, because this deals with vibrations, polarity. What was the last one? The one with Christian Bale. Exodus. Right? You remember the backlash that came out about that? The guy that produced the movie caught flack because he came out and made a stupid statement that the ancient Egyptians were European. Not only did black people come out and smash that, white people came out and smashed that. Now, why did they feel at the particular time? Now, I'm going to go deeper than this. When you go to what they call, what we know as the Gregorian calendar, or even the Hebraic calendar, they put it out during certain planetary influences, number one. Look at the times of the year that these movies are coming out. Look at the equinoxes that they're coming out in, because each equinox houses its own energy. Now, we're getting ready to go in to the dark, or the north, which is the winter solstice, right? This is also Masonic, because in the Masonic Lodge, anytime a candidate is taken through the lodge, they say nothing happens in the north because the north represents darkness. That's Masonic. That even goes further back to Egypt, because the four corners of the lodge don't represent north, south, east, and west, as you're told on surface information. It represents the four sons of Heru, the four canoptic jars. That goes into something else. I'm trying to give you symbology. This is all done intentionally because somebody's trying to take you from one state, and bring you into a whole other state. So don't just look at the surface level of it. Like we say, we have to go deep. And I went all there because when you were saying on the surface, well, how can I put gas in my car? We got to stop thinking on the surface. There is a way to penetrate that and go beyond that, is what I'm trying to say. But we're going to elaborate on that in a little more detail. Now, last thing, so I don't forget, because I know you keep going back to Set. All right, and then if somebody else has a question, we'll go. All right, the deity, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Sutuk, Seth, some say Set. Okay, just depending on what level, or if you're saying in the Greek version, you're going to be saying Sutuk. Okay, if you're going back to the Metu Neter, you're going to be saying Set. Okay, there's different variations of it depending on if it's a poor translation from Hebrew, which it gets in there too. You'll have another variation of it. I've even heard Sethith, which that's incorrect. All right, what does Set represent? People always say on the surface. I remember, I think I told you this when you were here at the last class. I put a picture up on Facebook just because I knew the reaction I would get out of people. The picture I put up, you can see it on my YouTube. You'll see it, a picture of Set swiping horrors. I had a bunch of religious people contact me and were offended by the picture, saying stupid shit like, brother, that's disrespectful to horrors. You know what? That's all I need to hear. You know what that tells me? That individual looks at Horus as a monotheistic Jesus-type character because he doesn't understand what it represented, the higher levels of it to the subconscious mind. Oh, man, you shouldn't do that. Horus is the great king of Egypt. So now I'm seeing all the Jesus influence coming out in people, whether they're conscious of it or not. So I did it intentionally, and I watched it come in. Now, there were some people that responded positively. They're like, brother, I fully understand what that represents. Some people would say stuff like, oh, well, that represents questioning authority, questioning the system. And that's exactly one aspect of it. Because basically Set is villainized, but if you go back to the pre-dynastic Egyptians, when you look at the opening of the mouth ceremony and the rituals that were done to take one to what they call the afterlife or higher states of consciousness, there was what they called the Order of Sutuk, or the Order of the Dark Brotherhood, that had the mysteries of those rituals. That was the key before you get your modern day in the last 46 dynasties, where now you see Anubis and Horus, Osiris and Osir, and they show the modern day depiction in the last dynasties on the walls in ancient Egypt of going through the opening of the mouth ceremony. I hear people talking about this, but what is the opening of the mouth ceremony? What does it represent? Was it literal? Is it something that actually happened, word verbatim, the way it's depicted on the walls? No, that's not how it happened. What did it mean when the Egyptians buried themselves with their treasures? Was this something that regularly happened? Or was this something that somebody was trying to convey a symbol to us? Set represents no boundaries, undefinable, no beginning, no end. Chaos, and when I say chaos, in the sense you can't put organization to it because it doesn't have boundaries. See, people get confused because they're not comfortable if they can't put a beginning on something and an end. So it's easy to say, in the beginning, God created, because now the mind can go into slave mode and go, okay, there was a beginning. Cool. Now the question is, how did God get there in the beginning? Okay, so now we have to ask ourselves another question. Before God said, let there be light, as we said 1,000,000 times in here, what is that confirmation of?
Darkness.
That he existed, or it existed, I shouldn't even say he, it existed in a state of darkness. So why are people always saying, come into the light? Right? The same thing in the Masonic Lodge. You're blindfolded, whether it's on the levels in the Blue House, the EA, the FC, or the M&M degree, and an apprentice, fellow craft master mason, you're blindfolded through all those degrees. But you know, in the most powerful part of the ritual, and I'm saying this from being a master mason and going through it, I'm speaking from experience, not because I read a book, okay? The powerful aspect of that ritual that I get out of it now when I reflect back on it, when you're blindfolded, you're acting off of your higher senses. You're going through the ritual relying not on this, not on things physical, you're relying on your higher state of consciousness. Because the mind is registered in the sounds in the lodge. I can sense things around me. I know I'm being moved. Then what tends to happen is you immerse yourself into the ritual. Now you're not doing the ritual, you become the ritual. There's a difference. So I found when I let myself go and just submerge myself into the experience, it takes on a different meaning. That's the purpose. Ritual transforms. It takes you, the reason why most people join mystical orders is because they're tapping into the dark aspect of their nature. They're being inquisitive because that endarkment or that darkness that exists in the inner depths of their subconscious mind is what's enthralling them to join a spiritual order. So this is what Set represents. It represents that aspect, one aspect of your subconscious mind. So I put that picture up, got the reaction that I knew everybody would do, and it showed me that people look at Horus as a Jesus type figure. It's the worst thing that you can do.
And then what about the brother that you was going to mention?
Say it again.
And what about the brother?
Which refresh my memory.
All right, you said Seth, and then you were saying something about it, that represents one, and you said another represents experience.
I'm not sure.
Or something like that.
I might have been saying, no, I think what I was saying earlier was experience is key in really having an understanding as opposed to just reading about it. That's what I was talking about earlier. Now, it doesn't mean you can't read. Again, it's not a knock on anybody. What I'm trying to say is you should experience as many things as you can. Don't somebody tell you, hey man, don't join that or do that. The more you expand your horizons, the more your consciousness expands. When you just limit yourself and say, I'm going to exclusively be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, this is why you form a tunnel vision way of thinking and a radical way of thinking. I mean, hence look at the Islamic world today. They're so radical, they got tunnel vision. To the point where they have no value on their own life. To the point where they'll blow people up for the sake of their fictitious God called law that doesn't even exist. Now the question I have to people in this country that claim to be bona fide Christians, would you be willing to kill yourself for your God? Shit changes quick. Now people are like, well, brother, that's not the same thing. Now we might term that bad, and I don't want nobody to misconstrue what I'm about to say. But that's fucking dedication. I hate to say it. Don't take that the wrong way. And I'm not condoning what they do. I'm just saying, when the will works to that level, the willpower, it's very powerful. It's like, remember the kamikazes in Vietnam? Everybody remember them? They were willing to win the war to give their very life. Now, I say, in order to understand this, we have to get inside that mindset. You can't defeat an enemy who you really can't see and who really has no value on their life when it comes to that particular thing. Because now everybody's talking about this Paris bullshit. And I don't know why people keep getting so surprised. This is just the beginning. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I told y'all this back in the 90s that this stuff was going to start happening. In the late 80s. And you know what? People don't care because when it doesn't come to their back door, they're like, whatever, it's not affecting me. I don't care right now. The only time people become proactive is when it directly affects them. Go ahead.
What is the meaning of sunset?
That can mean a multitude of things to a multitude of different people. Now, as far as what, Yehuda?
The word set.
Right. Now that could, again,
sun.
Right. That could mean a multitude of things to how somebody perceives that. All right.
That's true.
Obviously, you hear the word set in there. That's right to the door on the left. You hear the word set in there, right? It's the same thing when you phonetically. So when we're dealing with phonetics of words, right, and how they sound, it's the same thing as horizon, right? You hear the word Horus in there, Horus over the rising, representation of the sun. That's your Jesus story symbolically, right? Because there's three main positions of the sun. when the sun, I'm going to go back to your sunset, the sun coming up over the Horus rising, right? There's an aspect of Horus called what in ancient Egypt? Who is the resurrected Horus, but what is he called? No. But it's an aspect of Heru, but what is he called? There you go, say it again.
Ray Harket.
Ray Harket, Ray Harakati, some people pronounce it differently. That is the resurrected Horus, which represents Horus rising, right? So that would be also symbolic of this Jesus character rising from the dead, when the sun is rising above the Horus rising. Then when it's at its zenith point, or what they say around noontime, you see the reflection of the sun. If you're at a body of water, you see on a clear day the reflection of the sun on the water. That's your representation of Christ walking on water, right? We're going to go a little further. Then when the sun sets, the deity set, who's synonymous with dark, blackness, chaos, that would be symbolic of this Horus figure dying physically, right? All symbology. This is how they grafted your Jesus story. Now we can go back into all the other stuff about the 12 disciples represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. Jesus was the sun, blah, 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 blah. We can go on that level too. It's all depicting a story of nature and creation. But what tend to happen, the same thing, they took these stories and they turned these into physical beings. And now instead of us understanding the hidden mysteries of it and what it represented to the subconscious mind, we now have literally deified them and made some of them actual physical beings. Do you understand? Because this is a story that's been told over and over and over. Now, let me give you another example. The Set Horus story, or Set Osiris, the two warring brothers. The Enki and Enlil story. The Cain and Abel story. The Jacob and Esau story. It's all the same story. It's same and symbolic. All the stories say what? That two warring brothers were at odds with each other. But why I'm bringing this up is because as these stories got passed down to different cultures, based on the language they spoke, the culture that they were engrossed in, they interpreted it to fit their culture. When you're reading those stories, it's the same story being told over and over and over again. Same thing with Noah's Ark. I mean, we can go through all the stories. But we got to start focusing, for an example, David and Goliath story. What is the real symbolic meaning of that story? Are we supposed to focus on literally that David was some 9-foot giant or 10-foot giant and Goliath was some little midget that beat him up? Or are we supposed to focus on the aspect that one can overcome obstacles? See, what we did was we told stories that would bring out the divine in people. It was that we got to focus on the representation of what it represents to the subconscious mind and stop getting into these silly historical debates about Moses was black and Moses was this, and Abraham was this, and I'm the original Hebrew Israelites, and blah, blah, blah. That stuff can all be debunked when you bypass all that mythology and go back into spiritual magic and alchemy. Because now we got to get into astrology, symbology, right? We got to start breaking the number one spell that keeps us under an illusion is what we falsely call time. There's no such thing as time. Time exists. Time is. There's a way to calculate it correctly. We have the Temple of Dendera. We have the Egyptian. There's many different calendars, right? We go by Pope Gregory's calendar, the Gregorian calendar, which is incorrect in itself. We could be here all day talking about that. We know when we calculate true times, as I said before, time expands and is constantly contracting. Now, I used this a million times. If you throw a rock into a body of water, it lands in the center, and you have ripples that ripple out from the center of where that rock made impact. That's how time, it constantly is contracting and expanding. It is. Which also one can go back in time. You can call it astral traveling, call it whatever you want. One, for an example, and I used that little thing we did last time with music. Sound and vibration can trigger a certain thought process in your subconscious mind and bring you right back to any moment in time you want to go to. It could be a personal point in your life. It could be a past life. We talked about reincarnation. Remember that last time? Now, I gave an example. Who wasn't here last time? And I'll show you how this works. It works on everybody. Well, man, you're gonna catch it too quick, man. I don't want to do it yet. All right, Elder in the back. Name a song. Name any song that you like personally. Could be from when you were a child back in the day. Not a current song right now. Could be a group, a band, an artist, something in your youth, your childhood, your teenage years. Any song. Okay. Buffalo Soldier, Bob Marley. The first time you heard that song, try to reflect back. Or at any point in your life when you used to hear that song consistently, visualize something you were doing. Could have been in your house, around your mother. It could have been at name just one specific incident.
I was at my friend's house.
Okay. What's your friend's name? Cleveland. Where's your friend live? London. Do you remember roughly how old you were at that time? Around when that was going on? You see what he's doing, he's time traveling. Go ahead. Okay. Okay. What I'm just using that on surface. It goes a little deeper than that. And I noticed your eyes went this way because now you went. What is the first thing we do when we try to formulate a thought? We go, we're tapping into vibration and frequency because we're going to a place that's going to activate that. It's the first thing we say. When we sit there and we try to think, we go, we don't realize we do it, but we do it. We go, hold on, let me think real quick. Trying to figure out. Now, my point I'm trying to get to is, you mentioned the song Buffalo Soldier. It automatically triggered you to that moment in your life. Now, this is the way one can go back in time, too, to correct trauma on the subconscious mind. Say, again, you were bullied as a kid. You can't get past that until you correct that situation. Because then what tends to happen all through your life, you tend to be afraid of bullies. Anytime you get into a precarious situation, that triggers in the subconscious mind, whether you're aware of it or not, and you step down, you become afraid. Because even though that might have happened when you were a kid, it still has an impact on your subconscious mind. So you have to go back to that point, revisit it, correct it, but you can also time travel that way. I can remember, I'll use Keith Sweat, 1988, first album. I'll Give All My Love to You. I remember where I was the first time I heard it, what I was wearing, the type of clothes I had on, whose car I was in that night. I can remember each individual I was with. I can remember the female that I was with. I can remember what time of the year it was, the weather, how it felt, clothing. It's that simple. This is one aspect of how we can time travel. We have to incite a certain vibration and a thought that triggers, and we can be back in that moment. It's that simple. Okay?
Alright, even though you said that's time travel.
A form, that's one form of time travel.
Isn't that our mind is like a recorder? What's going on here, I may leave in like 6 weeks or a month.
Right.
I could remember, because my mind is constantly, recording everything. So with that and, tap it back into your mind, also go back to...
It's always a storehouse of information, but what I'm trying to get you to see, there's no such thing as a time barrier. Because the very fact that you can go into that storehouse, because remember, your subconscious mind is like the hard drive on a computer. It stores, correct what you just said, it stores all that information. Everything that we're talking about, anything that somebody comes to that creates the illusion that's new, it's not that it's new, it's just you just need to be reminded of it. Because it's already there. Sometimes it just takes somebody else to trigger that information. So nothing is new. You ever hear that term, there's nothing new above and beyond the sun? That is true. It's just what's happened is we've forgotten. And sometimes we need to do these little things to trigger that brain power, to wake up. And then we call it deja vu, we go, damn, shit, now I remember. So there's nothing that we're discussing here tonight that's new. I'm not saying anything that's new. I'm saying stuff that people are saying today, were saying last week, yesterday, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, and 1,000 years ago. It's just we've become indoctrinated, now we've forgotten all this stuff. So I'm using that one method of time travel to show you an example that you're not confounded by this false thing called seconds, minutes, hours. Because like I said, they went to digital and analog for a reason. To keep that illusion going, because when you look at the old clocks, and I've said this a million times, you have the second hand, right? It should be the first hand, but it's called the second hand. And then you have a tick, right? There's a space, and then you have a tock. Who's recording the gap in between the tick and the tock? I'm bringing that up because minutes, seconds, hours, and days are not accurate when you calculate time based on that. Do you understand that? You can't put a beginning and an ending on anything. Once you're confounded by time, you're automatically confounded by person, place, or thing. Do you understand that? There's nothing you can't think of sitting here right now that doesn't fall under the category of a person or place or thing. The problem is why people don't understand what the creator is, because the creator vibrates outside of person, place, or thing. So people are giving their definitions of God and the creator based on person, place, or thing. This is why they make God a man. He's up in a place, right? Confined, called what? Heaven. And heaven is bigger than God. Now it's also confirmation if God is in heaven, then God is not what? Can't be right here. Because now when you talk about omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, well, that can't be if you make God a physical, well, let me say this. When you limit God to a physical, mortal being. Time is the key to dispelling the myth to that illusion. Your ancestors are always here. Is your mother and your father alive?
Yeah.
All right. Your grandmother alive? No. You can communicate with your grandmother anytime you choose to. They're never dead. We got to stop using that term. They have translated to a higher state of existence. One just needs to know the correct tone, vibration, and correct mantra, and you can access your grandmother anytime you want to speak to her. It's that easy.
And what about saying, like how you alive and I can speak to you and you can hear what I'm saying and whatever you're saying, it may help me. But you're saying I can tap into my ancestors, but I'm not going to hear a live person giving me, positive feed where I can use this as something,
Well, let me tell you this. Now we're talking about experience. You'll find, and I can only speak on my personal experience, right? So I'm not going to give you a fiction illusionary answer and play Swami or Guru and act like there's a particular answer to that, because there's not. Nobody can tell you, for an example, what happens to you exactly at your moment of death, because everybody's experience is going to be different. Now, I know religions, cultures, and dogmas want to try to get a monopoly on that, but you know why you come into knowledge and information? To understand that key component. What is death? That's 90% of the reasons why people are here. You may not be consciously aware of that. We want to know what really is death. Why am I here? Why was I born? How did I get here? And most importantly, where am I going? That's why you come into states of consciousness. You're not just doing it because if you knew all those things, you wouldn't be seeking. You understand? So in the answer to a question like that, is one of many. I'm going to tell you this. From my personal experience, when one gets themselves to a certain point, it's as easy as I'm having a conversation with you. This is how I communicate with my ancestors. I have literally a conversation like me and you are just kicking it. It's that easy. Because once you're able, again, to bend the false concepts of time and hit that correct frequency and vibration, once you open that porthole up, we call it a porthole or a black hole or another dimension or a gateway to the realm of your ancestors, it's as easy as just stepping through the door and accessing whatever state of consciousness you want and communicating with these beings. And it's not limited just to your blood ancestors. This is available if you want to conquer great people, if you want to communicate with great people in history. This can be done. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't convince you of that until you raise yourself up to the realization of it. All right? Brother Tiger, I know you want to say something. No, all right. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
So I don't want to just limit it that it's just to your bloodline. But your bloodline is the first thing that you should have no problem accessing, because you're what are you doing? You're tapping into what's encoded in your DNA. So ancestral worship and direct connection to your blood relatives, that should be no problem once one gets to the basic levels of consciousness. But if you want to contact Genghis Khan, you want to hear something crazy? I'm gonna tell you this. It's a true story. I'm a huge baseball fan. I had an experience with Yogi Berra when he died. I had this whole, and again, this is personal. I don't want nobody to believe this. This is my personal experience, and I'll share it briefly with you. Because I'm a huge baseball fan, and I had that on my mind when Yogi Berra died, I had it on my consciousness. And for whatever reason, I had it in my mind at my altar that night before I went to bed, but then I knew why. Because as I started to fall asleep, I felt myself getting pulled from my body, and Yogi Berra took me to this like field of dreams type of environment, and all he did was just talk baseball with me. Didn't get into why he passed away, what was wrong with him. He just talked about the game of baseball. But it dawned on me, my love for baseball, and he has that love for baseball. So I just sat in this whole dream talking baseball. Now that may not mean anything per se, it means something to me. I'm saying I'm using that. You can contact anybody. You can contact anybody that has gone or made that transition. When you have disciplined yourself, you can make that spiritual connection.
One more thing, I also think like we come on to our purpose here on life. I've been having an in and out of body experience where you have your family roots, and we all come to this world, especially people coming from other countries. We're trying to make better for ourselves. I feel that as our sons and daughters grow, and myself, we have a part in life where we can make something for ourselves. I feel that in life, that once we come here, we have to establish something so we can pass on something like, I'm just going to use an example like a McDonald's franchise that we can bring on a legacy. I feel that you just don't want to come here and just, go to work and come home and cook, clean, and just die, and not leaving something here as a, as an example that you can pass down. They say, this guy, like how you come here to lecture and say for some reason you have schools that's popping up, and you pass. I can say, wow, this gentleman, I used to attend this class, and now he got lectures all over with his name, and you have kids that's going in your footsteps that other people are coming to listen to.
Right.
I feel that every person or every people should, not every people, but
Let me tell you what's happening. Let me tell you what's happening with you. And I got to tell you this because I'm sitting here watching. You're wearing red. You're wearing black. You got a hat on that says Sons of Anarchy. Black.
Yeah.
You're in a transition stage right now. You're dealing with that chaotic energy. It's a good thing.
Right.
Red and black deal with. I want to focus on that because as you were talking, I'm sorry I didn't hear a damn thing you said because I went to left field, and there was something else being projected while you were talking.
Right.
Everything you have a symbol of muerte, what they call death.
Right.
Not a physical death. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
You're going through your one stage or existence.
Right.
You're leaving that. You're in the crossroads of going to another one. It's happening right now, as you're speaking. It's all over you. It's everywhere. Now, what I'm trying to explain to you is, it's represented. You're wearing it on you. Because when I'm looking at everything that you're wearing right now, see, now he might, or somebody just a hearsay might come in and just go, oh, he's just wearing a red shirt, black hat, white hat with black on. They're not going to look at that like, oh, he's nothing. That's not what it represents to me, because as you were talking, your vibration opened it up to something else. Everything that you have on you, red and black, I want to go back real quick, because it's something you need to know. Dealing with, they call the deity Allegua. That's one of the colors, red and black.
Right.
Allegua is the one, I'm going to tell you, focus on your root chakra, which red is, if you get grounded in your root chakra, stuff is going to take off for you. The problem is, you're trying to go to the heart and the crown chakra. You're not grounded in the root. So your spirit is trying to tell you, you need to get that root chakra grounded. This is why you're wearing the red. Red is a good color for you to wear right now. Let me explain. Because you need to know this, because I'm sorry I didn't hear anything you said, but I'm telling you what's coming from you as you're sitting here. What you need to focus on is, I used red and black because the deity Allegua in the Orishi culture, the Yoruba culture, or Ifa, he is the road opener. He represents the paths being cleared. You can't do anything without propagating Allegua before you do work with any of the other deities. You have to start with Allegua, you have to end with Allegua. In this case, this represents your root chakra. But the red and black are symbolic of what those energies represent. Now red representing activation, black is not negative or evil. Black represents the deep, dark waters, chaos, inertia, no limits, no potential. Black is charged by what you put into it. You understand that? It absorbs and banishes anything, but it also, whatever you charge it with, is what it sends out. That's what's going on with you. I'm sorry, I just needed to throw that out there to you. I know you wanted to say something real quick, Tiger. No, you good? I'm sorry, but everything that you're wearing now represents that.
I just threw it on.
But you threw it on, but there's a reason why you threw it on. I'm telling you why you threw it on. That's why you threw it on. But it's all of you.
But can you respond to what I was saying?
What are you saying? Go ahead. I didn't hear what you said, but go ahead.
That, I just had an out-of-body experience that we all came here on this earth to make something of ourselves that we can pass down, whether it's, a franchise of a McDonald's or something like, Martin Luther King had a legacy.
Right.
And, or not that, Martin Luther King.
No, he had a legacy. That's correct.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X has his own legacy.
Right, and his son was about to come up, and they ended up killing him. Now, he could have been the next one who could have, started up, what we don't have now as a leader that can, keep people grounded and, to move forward and stuff like that.
Right.
So I just feel that, everybody is here for a reason, and some of us don't, get to that potential where we can have and create a foundation that we can, lead for our children.
But first, before you can help others, you got to establish your purpose first.
Right.
So what you need to get the answer to the second part of that question, first and foremost, is that old adage: we can't help others until we help ourselves first. Once you establish, not because somebody told you, not because somebody said, come up to you, yeah, brother, I think you would be a great activist. You got to wholeheartedly have your experience where this is my purpose here. Some of us are here to teach. Some of us are here to heal. Some of us here are to decode the mysteries. Some of us are here, we're hard workers, we're laborers, we're builders. Some of us here are great entertainers and athletes. We're put here for a purpose, but in that whole magical system, each one serves the purpose that keeps that thing flowing.
Right.
So we all have to identify our purpose in the sense we need to become what we're destined to be, not influenced to become something else. Do you understand?
Right.
So when you establish your purpose here, you become the leader. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Right.
Now, you can start your own schools of learning. The key is this. You are successful when you can leave this planet physically, because we know we're reincarnation, I'm saying in one existence, if you've left a stamp of impression. Let me ask you this, and this is how you'll know if you found your purpose or not. And you don't have to answer out loud. Don't. Do you feel if you left here tomorrow that you've left a lasting impression on this physical realm? Do you feel that, yes or no? Okay. So you're searching for your purpose.
I actually found it, but it's just that, jumping out there, because if you jump out there and I end up making a mistake.
Stop. See, stop right there. Stop with the fear.
Fear, yeah.
We're making excuses. Remember what set represents. Chaos. Unlimited. Stop putting boundaries on why you're not going to succeed. You're telling me all the reasons why you don't want to succeed, but you're not giving me any of the reasons why you can.
Right.
Not saying you don't have some.
Right.
I'm saying, remember, real spiritual magic is manipulation of the subconscious mind. So a man thinketh he is. So if you're going into this with doubts and fears and worries that if I don't take this gamble, and I'm not saying do it stupidly, believe me, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But you have to go into it with confidence because you're defeating yourself before you begin. So if you feel like, oh man, I gotta be careful, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna suggest you don't even do it because you're gonna fail before you even begin. So it's a state of mind. So a man thinketh, or a woman, they are, or he is, or she is. Because what starts to happen if you start thinking negative? Yes. What starts to happen if you think negative? Like, think if you played sports. You played sports growing up?
Yes.
You played basketball?
That's baseball.
What starts to happen if you think, oh man, I can't hit that three, man. I'm not feeling confident.
It's just a vibration will make you
You're gonna
play.
miss. You're not gonna hit that three.
Right.
Players that are confident, once they get into a what? A rhythm. It's called a rhythm for a reason.
Right.
They feel like there's not shit they're gonna miss. I'm in a rhythm now.
Right.
I don't even think about shooting the ball now. That's why you watch a basketball player, he goes off. You're like, damn, this dude hit 9 threes this game. He's got 40-something points. That's because he's in a zone. He's in a rhythm. Right. He's not thinking about, I'm going to shoot this ball and miss. He's like, man, shit, if I can get it up, I'm scoring. It's willpower, determination, rhythm, vibration, frequency. These are all aspects of mental alchemy manipulating the subconscious mind. We're just tapping the surface. Brother Tyke, did you want to say something? Oh, I'm sorry.
Great technique too. Great technique is when fear arises, that's coming from your subconscious. It came from somewhere.
That's right.
So a good technique to do is ask yourself why. Why do I fear right now? And just keep reasoning it out. And when you'll get to a point, for me, when I do that, I'll get to a point where some trauma, something happened that created that fear. And what I do is, we have the mindset I have now. Think in that trauma. Think, okay, what I do then, how I do it now. And I get over that trauma, and then all of a sudden that fear just disappear, and I just go forward. So it's all about when you have fears or certain things you feel like are blocking you. You gotta understand like that comes with the subconscious. So you gotta try to work through that. That's where he did going back in time, to that moment. You know what I'm saying? Like, honestly, when you're in that moment, you're literally there. You can really change the outcome, change what could happen. So
I mean, I have the answer. It's just that I never, had a business before. That's what I'm basically, trying to get myself into. It's just basically getting alone.
But become the answer. You have the answer now.
Yes.
It's just like I tell people when you read the book, now become the book. Because like I said in the very beginning of the class, it's okay to use books as guidelines and roadmaps. But again, I use the basic analogy. If I get a book on candle magic, by all means, I'm not saying follow that book to the letter or to the T. Because by doing that, you're taking on the energy of the person that wrote that book. I'm saying you can do that and say, all right, I got a general idea, but now I'm going to create my own candle magical system, because now by you creating it and stamping your personal energy on it, you've charged it, and there's no way you're not going to be successful because you're not up under something. I'm using the same concept for business. You visualize what you want to do.
Right.
You have a visualization. It always starts there on the mental plane. Right. Anything we manifest physically, we formulate it first on the mental. Right. We have to give it thought. Right. Now, phonetically, what deity in ancient Egypt ties into the intellect, knowledge, thought, right? In Greek, Tahuti, right? That's why I said in the beginning of the class, instead of reading about Tahuti, do you know how to invoke the energy of Tahuti, the archetype energy of Tahuti? Because in that case, if you need mental stimulation, a great thing to do would be to invoke the Tahuti energy. That would be a great thing for you to do because Tahuti is the wise scribe, the recorder. He represents knowledge, intellect, and he deals with the Kundalini or the pineal gland chakra, right? That's what you focus on. Like when I go to my shrine, I don't look at my Tahuti statue as if I'm worshiping it. It represents a symbol to me, to my subconscious mind. So if I need to focus on that, I'll do that. If I need to, for an example, work color magic and I need to increase psychic and spiritual powers, I'm going to use the color yellow. Yellow is highly spiritual when you work with it the correct way and you charge it. I'm just giving you little ideas. There's many different methods. There's not one specific way. There's other systems. We haven't even talked about runes, reading stones, crystal gazing, charging crystals. These are all different aspects that one can work with. Tarot cards, right? That gets into a whole nother story. There's magical systems and various different levels of what we call the tarot. The Kabbalah, right? We haven't even touched on that. The Sephiroth and the living tree. We haven't even gotten into that. What that really represents when you take it back to ancient Egypt, not on the surface information. It's not some mystical stuff that was started by modern day Jews 300-400 years ago. That stuff goes even heavier. You know, one of the principles, Hermetic principles, is the principle of gender, right? But when you get to a certain state spiritually, there is no gender. Gender manifests on each plane, but when you go beyond that, we know if we're vital life force beings of energy, there is no gender in that. Now the question I ask you is, I did a whole thing on this because people get caught up why male and female. Well, the question is this: the original beings that incarnated on this planet were androgynous. They were hermaphrodites. They had dual sex organs. We are defunct of that. The question is, why did I come here with a penis, and why did a female come here with her body, a clitoris, which is nothing? It's the same thing, but they have mitochondria, DNA, in higher levels than.
You said others came as hermaphrodites, or they were? Like
No, the first if you want to know the first physical beings that incarnated on planets, go into the Dravidian culture. You can look as recent as Akhenaten. He was a hermaphrodite. Look, go back. You got to research the records hard.
That's the first original.
No, not the first original.
Okay.
We got to get out of that mind state too. Stop with first and original. I'm just taking you to certain points in history. Akhenaten, if you look at how he's depicted on all the records, he always has the feminine body type shape, but the masculine head. He was a connection when you go back and trace it to the Ogdoads. He was a hermaphrodite. He was directly linked to those androgynous beings that first incarnated on this planet. He represented that balancement or totality and equilibrium. This is why he's considered the father of what? It's not really true, of monotheism. You understand? Okay. Do you understand that? But there's a higher symbology in it. I'm saying, I'm trying to eliminate, we got to get out of the male-female thing. We need both aspects of that energy and polarity for us to advance. So I'm not in agreement with the black woman is God, and the black man's here, and the black woman is God, and the black... No, it's side by side. You can't have one without the other. Now, when you talk about on the planes, physically, the female gender manifested first. Females were physically on the planet first before men were. That's dealing with physical scientific information. The reason why all your holy books call God a man is because on the mental plane, from the mental plane on down to the physical, male gender manifested first. This is why they put in all the holy books, God is a he. It's always a he, other than the fact that it was chauvinistic men that translated these books. Okay?
Also we have female energy in us. Male and female in us.
That's correct. And you're gonna find out, this is my own personal experience, working with the feminine energy is more powerful than the male energy.
Right.
Big time.
I like to add it like this.
Definitely.
The male energy issues forth. So the feminine is a container. So it would be more powerful because it can hold whatever issued forth. It's given to it. Again, like a talisman.
Right.
So if used properly, of course it will be more powerful because it's actually, like they say, doubling your net worth.
There you go. That's an excellent point.
You said the male gets something by the female. You just said something before.
Well, the male is always recharged by the female. Always. When the female goes through her menstruation cycle, she's actually recharging herself. The reason why I say this is because females are internal beings. Males are external beings. You understand that? Meaning this is why this doesn't make it right. Because remember the topic, somebody brought up the topic of polygamy. Polygamy was actually practiced by females first before it was practiced by men. When you go into these Dravidian cultures, a lot of people like to hear that shit. Because we have people in the conscious community that want to have 3 and 4 wives, But when they hear that shit, now they're like, well, wait, no. What I'm trying to say is, this is why it's more natural for a man to have multiple sex partners. It doesn't take from our energy as much as it would a female. Because when you're exchanging DNA, saliva, it affects the female much stronger than it does the male. It has more of an effect on her spiritually, on her hormonal balancement, her genetic makeup, and more importantly, her mental makeup. Now, let me give you an example. This is the reason why you can go back to, I can't think of the Hindu's name. It's actually where Dr. York stole his book, The Genetic Kiss. I can't think of the Hindu's name. I have it in my Scribed app. Where he talks about when you're intermixing DNA. It's the same guy that wrote the breath book. I can't think of his name. Swami, it's a Hindu dude. I'll get it for you. And then you can actually access the book online in PDF. And he talks about when you're intermixing or swapping DNA. You ever been in? Let me ask you this. You ever been in a relationship where you couldn't get over a female? We all been there. Don't lie. You don't gotta be cool and shit. Just be honest. At some point in your life, whether you were a teenager, in high school, we all usually had, on different levels, that one girl we couldn't get over. Now, vice versa. I'm sure there's a woman in this room can also attest to, after they came out of a relationship, no matter how bad it might have ended or whatever went wrong, they had a period, and some periods can be very long and some short, but there was a period where they couldn't get over that person. Know this, when you're exchanging DNA and fluids, saliva, sperm, that stays in the system for 5 to 7 years before it can fully be out. Now, what tends to happen is, whoever's the dominant energy in that relationship, that individual's DNA can overcome the other spirits and more powerful. So this is why you say, this girl was treated so bad. Why don't she just dump this dude? No matter how bad she was treated, for some reason she can't make the disconnect right away. That would determine because that individual's DNA was a little bit stronger. So what I'm saying is, when swapping DNA, it usually affects the female because she's more internal and she houses a lot more energy than we do as males, where we can move on and just go to the next one and sometimes the next one, unfortunately. I'm not saying that makes it right. But what I'm trying to say is, be careful of who you're exchanging with. Sex, we didn't even talk about tantric and sex magic. We haven't even done a real class on that. There's a science to that. Outside of the physical pleasure of sex, which we all do it for that, but who really practices sex? By psychic projection. We can take sex and project our consciousness on another individual and vice versa. We can tap into those spiritual energies and frequencies when we really know what sex is and what it really represents, other than pure physical lust and pleasure. What were you going to say? Anyway.
You were saying based off of saliva and everything like that will make you have feelings for that person even after you break up.
Before you say that, I want to stop. Remember the story of Isis or Aset and Ra? You know the story how she got the sacred word? She wanted Ra's sacred name, correct? In every form of what they call the black arts or voodoo, and I hate to say, they always need some form of DNA to work the magical formula. Saliva, sperm, hair, skin samples. Do you remember when you go back and read the story how Aset convinced, and I don't want to say tricked because she had a right to know it just as much as anybody else did, what the story represents. What was the key element she used to get in that sacred word, or that sacred hidden name? That was a magical name. It wasn't a physical name. It was a tone or a vibration or a frequency, that correct word that she could say that resonated and opened up the universe to her. So now she became like Ra. She was God. She saw through the eyes of God. She wasn't asking no more. She became. You understand? What did she use? How did she get that? Symbolically, what do they say she used? The saliva. Go back and read the story. She used the saliva from Ra. That's symbolic. It's trying to convey something to you. DNA genetics. But anyway, go ahead. I want you to go look that up when you get some time.
No, you just answered it.
All right, that's why I stopped and went there. I was trying to give you a metaphor. Just so, okay. Anybody else? Anybody else have any other questions? What time we got? We've got about 20 minutes. So I'm gonna finish up with a few more things. Does anybody have any random questions they want to ask? Feel free. Remember, this is question and answer.
Yeah,
Sure.
Just break down a little bit more about the benefits of contacting your ancestors first.
Good question.
Before other deeds.
All right, this is, again, and what I'm about to say, by all means, I'm not saying this is the only and correct answer. Again, now I like to identify when I'm speaking from experience, and there's people that have had very similar experience. I look at you can't go from A to Z and skip B to Y. What I mean by that is people want to, for an example, say not us in this room, because I would like to believe everybody here is on a certain level of consciousness. People like to, I never understood this. People want to worship the Most High God, Allah, Jehovah, when they want to bypass where the lineage of God starts very simple with your mother first, your father, your mother's mother, your father's mother, vice versa. You have to work it back in that system. Because that's the symbol of eternal life that the ancient Egyptians were trying to teach. They always kept that bloodline connection, and this is why they believed they never died. They lived on eternally. It wasn't just something they were randomly throwing out there. So I find in personal experience, and many people will attest the same thing, if you activate those that are closest to your blood and DNA, they can open doors to other higher levels of spirituality for you. Now, is it necessary? No. It's definitely, by all means, it's not a mandatory requirement, but you're going to find out the experience of it is going to enhance your consciousness to a whole nother level. So I would recommend to people to start there. Is it absolutely mandatory? The reason why I say no, I'm going to tell you why. Some people are naturally in tune on high, doesn't make them special or less or better than other people. There's some people, for an example, I've been at drum circles where somebody that's technically not studied on a spiritual path in a long time, they get mounted by a spirit. Now this is somebody that doesn't really consider themselves conscious or spiritual, but because they have that strong DNA connection, some do have it, and it's easier to turn on than others. So it is not factually mandatory required, but I would suggest if you feel like it's not coming easy to you, I definitely would start there. That would definitely be, the benefits of it is, I find if you communicate with relatives connected to your bloodline, you get answers to a lot of questions you want to know. Because I can communicate with my mother, and I'm not going to share that, but it's personal. So if I start spitting a bunch of personal stuff and you believe it, I just start my own religion. And I don't want to do that. So I can communicate with my mother on the afterlife. I can communicate to her like what she's doing right now, what she's going through. She can communicate to me like if she sees sickness or illness in me, like, look, this is what's wrong with your body. You need to go get it checked out. I'll go get it checked out. Bam, it's on point. Because when we contact, and really it's just our higher self, we are able to use that force to better shape the energy in the life around us. That's it. It works for your favor. So I've literally had that. My mother said, look, I'm telling you, you got something wrong with you. You're not feeling it, but I'm telling you, I see it. And I might have went to the doctor and I found out one thing that I was lacking. I had to get more infusion of, are you familiar with amino acids? L-lysine. If you know what L-lysine does, L-lysine cleans the neuromelanin inside the body. Everybody's not only just the neuromelanin on the outside, the neuromelanin on the inside, which is encoded in every single organ in the body. I found out, my mother told me, she said, you need to take more L-lysine. I started to take more L-lysine. You know what? Lo and behold, I started to feel more alert, more awake. Intuition started kicking in. Because you have to keep your neuromelanin and your neuromelanin clean. And just because you could be being dark or light skinned has nothing to do with this. Let's dispel that myth right now. Because remember, the neuromelanin just acts as an electromagnetic conductor. It absorbs these energies and frequencies. And the neuromelanin starts on the brain stem cells. It starts in the brain. Everybody has the capacity, regardless of what the physical melanin is on the outside, to manifest that in high abundance. But there's a procedure to do that. So I always get caught up in the light skin, dark skin debate. Melanated family consists of Asians, Latinos, blacks, on different levels. We're all a different manifestation of those melanated beings. So it doesn't mean that if you're dark or light, because I think, unfortunately, some people think because they're dark that makes them superior. Vice versa. There's Cubans that I run into all the time that are so damn racist because they look more Caucasian, but if you shake that family tree, a dark-skinned brother is going to fall out of that tree. But we tend to identify what we look like, not what we are by blood. You are who you are by blood, and blood type determines that. You'll find O-positive people genetically are more of a manifestation of who they are by nature. If you have A-positive blood physically, you're going to find you have more of that European gene in the blood spiritually. It doesn't mean it makes you any less or great. I'm saying you are who you are by your blood. Because I've watched people, for an example, that claim to be musicians and get on natural instruments and they can't play. Because they're into computerized beats and hip-hop beats. And I've literally watched at drum circles, brothers get on drums and play hip-hop beats. And I'm like, me and him will look at each other like, what is this? But it goes to show you, music, which we haven't even touched on, is on the 4 bars. Excuse my language, it's a motherfucker. It goes on to the biorhythms of the heart. Now, how do you know that? Real simple. You can hear a certain type of music, and it incites a certain emotion in you. That's fact. You watch when the white boys hear all that, what do they call that? The violent metal music? Heavy metal, or no, there's another name they call it now.
Grunge, I guess.
Whatever, grunge, whatever. You see how it incites a reaction in them. They start jumping around, acting all crazy. Well, think about this. You could be listening to hip-hop or R&B, right? Think about if you're listening, I'm going to go back in the day in my time. I'm an older dude, I'm 44. So if I hear Rakim, it incites a certain, it's more lyrical talent, information, wisdom. If I hear Slick Rick, it's more party rap. If I hear Public Enemy, it's more revolutionary consciousness. I'm saying why I'm doing this. But then back in the day, if somebody like NWA came on or Dr. Dre, now all of a sudden I feel like I just want to go punch somebody in the face when I was a kid. They know this. They know how to incite emotional reaction in you. You understand that? Now, look at the music today. Everybody sounds the same. Everybody's saying the same garbage. Everybody's pimping hoes, drinking Cristal, driving cars. Every video's the same. You know, the slow walking in slow motion, holding up their jewelry. You know, in the club scene. There's something being intentionally done on the psyche of the subconscious mind. Now, I said earlier in the beginning of the class, this is what the young kids are looking at. Now, they seeing this shit on TV. You think going in and sitting them down and lecturing them for 3 hours how great you were back in Egypt? They're like, when is this dude going to be done talking about this bullshit? Because they can't correlate it to what they just saw on TV. But if we teach them how to work their spiritual magic, we're giving them a practical alternative to create the change. Because you can sit that kid down for hours and read, yeah, great, all right, I descend from the Egyptians, great Africa, blah, blah. It only can go so far. That's why I said in the beginning of the class, we're over-intellectualizing this sometimes. And I always turn to dudes and say, and I've talked to them all these House of Consciousness cats. I've had everybody on my show you can think of. Phil Valentine, Brother Panic I've had on, Dr. Jude Pulchrum, Dr. Everett Bruce Bynum. I've had all these people on my show. I don't bring them on because I necessarily agree with everything that they say, but I want the listeners to get a perspective of what they're teaching about. You understand? So you can compare. But my thing is, when I turn to a lot of these people and go, all right, so what is the solution? What are we doing? Give me some practical methods that we can make the change. Now, all of a sudden, everybody can talk history, but nobody can have magical, spiritual, practical solutions in general. Just common sense of how we can fix this. Yeah. I won't say nobody, but in general. There are many people that have solutions. We're not gravitating to the right people because everybody wants a feel-good speech of how great they were back in the day. I'm personally over that. I can see it. Yeah, I can sit here and talk to you about Egypt. There you go.
Are we greater back in the day than we are right now?
Yes. No, I'm going to say no.
No.
Because here's this.
People can't.
No,
people don't
that's a great
understand.
point. You heard what he just said? Say it. Say it again, brother.
Greater back in the day than we are right now is the question.
What would people's answer be to that?
All right.
Yes or no? Hold on. Anybody else? I'm not to cut you off. Anybody else? You heard Brother Tiger's question. Were we greater back then than we are now? I agree with that. Anybody else? Well, here's the reason why I'm saying that. This is the problem, and you remember I did a class several months ago, a back in the day syndrome. We all have a back in the day syndrome. Okay? We have a back in the day syndrome. Go ahead.
True that. The brother Rana just hit it right on the head. Like you said, the back in the day is still going on. So
That's right.
the evolution, because from my perspective, I know, like we were talking before, about
Right.
past lives.
Correct.
Person.
Correct.
So what especially today was a heavy day for me. That's why I had to come here.
Right. You know, I remember you called me earlier. We talked. Yep.
And I was like, okay, I gotta ask you this thing. So we had our conversation, and obviously it was not superficial or imaginary.
That's right.
Right. So.
And it's some bugged out shit, but we'll talk about that another time.
What
Anyway.
came through more or less for me today is that looking at a couple of my past lives, I was shown my mistakes to make sure I don't repeat them. You understand? So evolution-wise, I I see my evolution. My evolution is from where I was, and it was a heavy place at the time, to where I need to be now, because we're still here doing this.
Correct.
So whatever was done in between is irrelevant. Personally, everybody's dealing with their own evolution here. You've been here before.
Right.
And whatever you didn't learn or wherever you left off,
That's right.
that life that I told you about, when I told you the birth date, I didn't tell you the past at 52.
Correct.
And I'm 52 now.
Correct.
So this is the continuation.
Correct.
Right.
Now I'm just going to throw this out there. We'll expound on it a little further. Me and Brother Tiger talked a few months ago. We hadn't talked since then, and I'm finishing up doing some work today, and my phone rings. I don't recognize the phone number coming through, so I wait for the voicemail. I get the voicemail, so I call him up. While I listen to the voicemail, I was like, "Oh, it's all right, Brother Tiger. I ain't heard from him in a while. I'll give him a call." So I was like, "Hey man, what's going on, bro?" He's like, "Hey, June 7th." When he said that, the hair on my head stood up on my back. We're not going to get into detail with it now because it has a strong significance to him, and it has a very strong significance to me. So what I'm trying to say is, to prove your point, there's no barriers in connecting on this spiritually. Now, I met Brother Tiger one time. We don't have no history. He was down here doing some lectures and some work, and it was around the same time. He did one before I did, and I was slated after him. So we just happened to run into each other, and we just started talking. We exchanged numbers, and we said, you know what, we got to fit in, try to get together and do some stuff, which we're definitely going to try to move forward on that instead of just talking about it. And I said, all right. So I know nothing about this man other than what I just recently met from him. And then we didn't talk for a few months. And then, bam, this happened today. We didn't get into a deep conversation. He said, now, real quick, June 7th, that was it. Now, he didn't really need to say much more, because when he said June 7th, it took me back to everything June 7th. We're gonna explain it, and the money thing came up. That's why I said, just be patient. He's a little more versatile and skilled than that. We're gonna have him break that down. That whole thing came through crystal clear. We'll talk about that. How to get around what your concern is. And it's a viable concern, because look, you can't be spiritually conscious in a God and be broke as hell. I want to say that again. The thing I don't understand, and I'm not saying that I'm rich, but I'm going to say again, I am not starving. If I need something, I get it. But I've learned to petition the universe to provide me with what I need. You got to learn the difference between a want and a need. People are asking for shit they want. You don't get shit you want. You only get shit you need. So if you open up that spiritual energy, you will always have a roof over your head in abundance. You will have whatever car you need to drive in abundance. Your family will be provided for in abundance. So I look at it this: if you're not successful physically, I'm no disrespect, I can't really follow your blueprint. I say that with respect, because I'm not judging a man or a woman. Sometimes you're going through things, you haven't identified that crisis, so you need to work through that. So I don't say that judgmental. I'm just saying where I'm at. If you're talking to me about health and herbs, you gotta have a track record of that. You can't be coughing mucus up and shit and sick, and you want to give me a lecture on what herbs to take. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make no sense. Don't lecture me on how to invest my money, and your ass is broke, and you got a history of doing bad business dealings, your shit crashes all the time. That just doesn't work. You should be a manifestation of what you say you represent. So if I see you're a living example of the information you teach, then I say that brother or that sister, they got it together. I can learn from that brother or sister. It's that simple. So I never could understand when people come to me and this brother all the time. How many we know cats that come with a pyramid scheme? Shut it down. Yeah, brother, you know what? I need to talk to you. If we invest this money, and this person, shut it down.
They flip 4 times.
Yeah. Times 4. That doesn't work. Research the track history. Don't let your gullibleness get sucked in. If somebody's we had cats try to do. We used to have a temple, and we had a cat that wanted to come to the temple and give a lecture on herbs. And I'm like, all right, this dude's got, no offense, he's jacked up. You know what I mean? He's always sick, he's coughing, and how can you take that it's not being judgmental. Now, I struggle in that area. I would love to get information. It's a tough thing. You're out here, you're on the go. Some of us aren't eating the way we should. I don't want to turn this into a dietary class. I'm just using that thing. But there's a connection and an aspect to that also. But you have to be a living example of what you teach. Just because you read about it don't mean you are about it. Okay?
You were saying something about being successful in having things in abundance, where you don't want things, you do things as far as need things.
I said that because most people's lives are miserable
Right.
because they're chasing wants.
Right. But
Go ahead.
as you get older, you experience that, okay, you have the things that you need, but you want to be able to attain them, not by physically have to be there to obtain these things. You want to start using your head and start throwing money out there, where money would generate money, as I can so-called see it's business people and stuff like that.
Right.
You know, no one after a while wants to have to show up at a job in order to, extract
the
money,
check.
in order
That's right.
for you to be able to have abundance or whatever. Like, yeah, I worked 30 years, I have this, I have that. Nah, that's the industrial stage, just to be in the technological stage, the information age, where we want to use our mind and like, okay, if I put my money over here, how much I can generate and be in Hawaii sitting with my wife or whatever, and while money generating. That's the new return back.
Well, let me put it to you like this. You're familiar with the science of the pendulum. You know how that metaphysical concept works. When the pendulum, as much as you shift it to the left is what? As much as it's going to what? Sway to the right. When the pendulum is still, it's smack in the middle, right? Now, let me tell you why I'm telling you that. I'm just trying to give you something metaphor for you to meditate on. All right. When you're dealing with that aspect, like you said, most people go to one extreme than the other. The people, like you said, it's not just about being fulfilled with physical things. Like you said, you could be working your whole life, generate enough money, and have all the physical things you want, but there's still something lacking, correct? You might be working that job for 30 years where you want it to generate with itself. You'll find that one is either chasing one to the extreme more than the other. You'll find, ask yourself this, why do you see all these entertainers, athletes, they have more money than they can shake a stick at, but then you say, damn, they either go spend it all, they get caught up in drugs, or some crazy shit happens. You want to know why? Because they don't have the right intellect, knowledge, or information, because they're lacking spiritual discipline. So just think about it. If you got somebody that's not spiritually conscious on the level, just on a common sense level, and I give you millions of dollars, what do you think's eventually going to happen? Well, you're going to start, I got nothing to do. I'm going to start getting high. Because I don't know what to do with myself. I got all this money. Well, the same person that's working that job, like you said, or can't get out of that rut or that system. You remember I went back to what you said earlier when you were saying you had this idea, but you kept saying but there was that doubt factor. So again, what one has to do is visualize what you're trying to do, number one, to get out of that system. Because again, I'm going to go back to you become your thoughts. You're going to find most people in that situation that you mentioned, I like to say get in a comfort zone or become complacent. And they don't want to change that because they're afraid of changing that everyday routine because out of fear. Because they're like, oh man, I can't give up this everyday consistent job. But yet they might have all the tools, systems in place to start their own business, generate an idea or a concept, like you say, to make money generate for itself. How do you think you see all these old white guys playing golf while you're going to work every day, and they out on a Tuesday morning shooting 18 holes?
Especially the beach.
Well, that's because they deal in international commerce. Forget, that's a whole nother story. When you want money making money for itself, now we're going into a whole nother realm. Because all those bullshit ideas they give you on the surface, if you already got it, they raped it and destroyed it. If they're getting it to you, they already got out of it what they can get out of it. And now you got it and it's no good no more. That's why I say these business seminars and these scams and these schemes, come here, join and register, get the packet for $350. We're going to show you how to flip houses. Yeah. You know this bullshit.
I went to one of
yeah.
those, and I went to one of those, and it was probably like 300 people there. And what they was doing is basically telling you how they generate money and how they can get into the business and stuff like that. And they kept saying, well, and the guy was showing.
But it's real. You can do that. But what I'm saying, let me just stress this: you can flip houses, make tons of money. I know people that do it. But what I'm saying is, where you got deceived, then you need to pay $400 to learn how to do it. You want to say something? Go ahead, brother. Tell you.
I have a question for the room. If we're in 2000 so-called 15 right now, right? Mm-hmm. We've had at least 30 or 40 years of supposedly an open market that allows millionaires, like you mentioned, from ball players to everything else.
Right.
And then you need not one person with that level of finance. Because they showed, I believe, one time they showed a couple months back, one Caucasian man that invested like $10 million in the community and gave everybody in the community a college education and all that stuff. I think you came across that.
Yes.
But it was played down, but at the same time it made you question, like, wait a minute, this is one dude with 10 mil. I'm hearing about contracts for 100 mil. So the question that I have is, like Madam mentioned also, is there a karmic thing going on? Is there a leash? Is there a glass ceiling? What's going on with that? Just food for thought.
You asking everybody that question?
Yeah, he's posing the question. We haven't talked about karma.
I think that it is. I think that it is a glass ceiling, but there is value. You have to know what you have to know what has value in order to be able to escape out of the glass ceiling. Not too many people know what to invest their money in and to know what has value.
And, let me take you here for a minute. Like with magic, what makes magic? What charges the magic? It's the same thing with this. If somebody gets $1 million, if you're dealing with karma, it's always the intent that you have that charges it. Let me stress that again. I'm gonna correlate it to two ways: to money and working spiritual magic. Candle magic. It's very simple and basic. So I'm gonna go there again. What charges the actual ritual itself is the intent that's driving the ritual. Now the intent, remember I said, when you're working with the universe to petition, I always tell people, make a list of things that you're trying to obtain, right? Go through that list after you're done and separate what actually is a need and what is a want. You're going to find out 80% of that shit on that list is a want. When you petition the cosmic, for lack of a better word, to open up and give you what you need, you'll never have a problem. This is what I'm saying, and it works on different levels. You'll never be hungry, you'll never be broke, you'll never be without. I'm telling you that from experience.
So can you translate that?
Watch. Now let me translate it simply. You got that concept. If I'm doing a candle magic work principle because I want to overall attract success on all levels. I want to attract business dealings, say. I want to make myself marketable to others, per se. Realistic shit, not like, I'm going to burn this candle and be a millionaire. That shit does not work. So that's not what I'm talking about. That's you're not going to go into any of these stores and buy a money candle and burn it and all of a sudden money's going to appear. That's not how this works. Because if you don't charge it with the intent, but now dealing with intent, you have to identify, is your intent justified? This is where people get lost in working magic. Meaning, did you try every other viable solution where it's become now out of your control physically to obtain the goal you're trying to achieve? Most people have not done that. So then they go work a magical purpose and it doesn't work. And they say, shit, it's not working. That's because the cosmic has not been receptive to the intent that you're petitioning. People don't understand this when you work with magic. So, ball players, athletes, what is their intent, majority of them, for becoming rich? It's usually for personal, selfish reasons. Not all, because I don't want to say there's not a lot of athletes that have not given back to the community. There are people that have, but we're saying on the wide scale spectrum, most athletes are doing it for the glory, the fame, the self-ego, and this is the reason why it is a karma thing, because the intent that charged it was ego-driven. And now we got to leave physical law and establish there's universal and nature laws that precedes physical law. So if your intent is just to become a millionaire and you're going to become a glutton and hoard all that money and not do something to make it more productive and not just generate money for yourself, because obviously first law of the universe is self-preservation, but generate it in abundance, then this is why we're in the boat we're in. Because like Brother Tiger said, why are there all these, I mean, man, that's ridiculous athletic contracts where their kids can be taken care of. But these are the same people talking about when I grew up in the hood. I hate when I listen to these stories of how they're talking about, well, I grew up in the hood and I had nothing and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now I'm asking you, you had that experience. If you're not one of those that's trying to break that cycle or change, then we continue that energy grid. That's called getting sucked in the matrix. Because the average athlete has got more money, probably he can build his own Egyptian city if his intent was to put it in the right purpose. Now, by all means, I'm not saying that every athlete should sacrifice every aspect of their wealth, of their wealth. But there's a way you, again, self-preservation first, But if you take care of yourself in the right way, everything else is going to take care of everything else. Not in a spooky way, though. What I mean is, if I've established that all my needs are taken care of, I move from that point. But if I got all my needs and now I'm doing some stupid shit like Hammer did back in the day, and I'm buying 38 houses and 200 cars because I just want to collect them because I can, and then I want to know why karma came back and said, boom, you're broke, you ain't got shit now. And now I all of a sudden became religious and found Jesus, and now I say, well, money is evil. Oh, the books.
So you actually answered the question.
Okay. You got it?
Yeah.
Why do people find Jesus when shit hits the fan? You ever notice that when people go broke or they get locked up, they either find the law or Jesus or God? I've been saved. It's a poor man's mentality. You haven't been saved. It's just you hit rock bottom and you didn't establish why. So now you're going to say that I found God. And all of a sudden Ham is religious. Because now it justifies his screw-ups. Rather than him say, I've heard him say, yeah, I was stupid. But now he's found a reason not to be successful.
When you have money, you don't need Jesus. When you're broke, you need Jesus. But I have to...
Two things. When he mentioned the ceiling, the brass ceiling that's set up, it's got to be set up from within the system. So the fact that they gave it a medium of exchange, and like I mentioned earlier, it's talismanic, right? It's got sorcery built in to control the energy. So that's why, but time has changed now. And I spoke to him about that in the one direction.
That's right.
It's a completely different flow right now. Right. So you're going to start seeing things even from the last couple of years that have been building. So I don't know if anybody else saw it here, but there's an Indian dude that found the 5-hour energy. Has anybody seen these videos on YouTube? Alright, so he's got massive media campaign to put out his movie called Billions for Change or whatever. This could not happen before now. That shows you that something else is happening. When I look into his dude, I found out he used to be a monk. This guy made this money for 5 hours and really don't need it. So he kind of talks about the short version. I got all this money and I don't need it. So what am I going to do? So he took 95% of the money and founded a foundation for change. He's 4 billion in it. So 1% of 4 billion is still 4 billion.
That's enough.
So you know what I mean? 1%. So now we got 300. That's crazy. You got all this amount of money that's being actually used in a positive way where the system was never set up for this to happen. That means the system has been uncovered. It's done.
Right. Also, I realized that due to the computer, and now that we can go on YouTube and find answers, where we're going to be able to find answers from other people, it screwed up those things. So now, yeah, we have ladders set up where we can end up, I feel, reaching to where we want to become successful, but you have to know, what puzzle to put down to reach that.
Well, that's what. Yeah. It will feed you enough chocolate, but also
But wait.
But then when you say need, it just tapped into my mind that if I get into a business, I have to go to what people need.
When Tiger was just explaining about this Indian gentleman that was a monk. Remember you just said earlier about making money on its own?
Yeah.
That's the finest example of that. There's a way it can be done, but we're thinking on a surface level.
Right.
Because we've been programmed to think mundane as far as, where's my next meal coming from? How am I going to pay my rent? Right? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to take care of my kids? I'm not saying they're not justifiable concerns. They are. But when the concern consumes you, you're done.
You don't have enough energy to do nothing else.
That's right.
It's leaving you enough.
You remember the old parable in the Bible? I'm using the Jesus parable. And I use this on religious people all the time. Remember when Jesus said, come, stop, follow me. What was all the doubts? How am I going to eat? How am I going to feed my family? What did Jesus say? The birds of the field, the lily, they eat. The Heavenly Father, I'm using a metaphor now, and I'm not getting religious on it. The Heavenly Father provides for them, right? He was trying to say, oh ye of little faith. If they eat every day, they ain't concerned about it. Why are you? Now again, right? I'm not telling you by all means. I don't want you to leave here and get spooky guru and be like, shit, I'm quitting my job. I'm gonna stay here today and meditate at my shrine. I want to be clear on that. I'm telling you, always have a plan, have your visualization, map it out, and follow your path. There's always a method to do it. And if it's right, it's going to map itself out. So by all means, I'm not coming from a jump blindly into something without doing your research. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying if you plan, eliminate the doubt, and have a backup plan to the backup plan, you'll be okay. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Because here's another thing I get dumb looks on people's faces. To show you how complacent we are. If you woke up tomorrow and there was no more grocery stores, where would you get your next meal? How? Alright, if you had to start from scratch. I'm talking about you woke up tomorrow. I'm not talking about going into the store and buying a packet of seeds and planting them and that says it grows cucumbers. I'm talking about if you had to get up tomorrow and all you had was what you have right now. You have Mother Earth, you have the soil, you have the trees. You need to be educated on every tree that's in this backyard right now. You need to be educated on every berry, seed, and nut that it produces. Right. I'm saying, I'm using this because we've become so dependent on the system. Where would you get your next meal? Can you hunt? Because you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to plant something to eat and grow, or you're going to kill something. So if you're not a farmer or a hunter, you're going to starve. I'm using this as an example. Give you another example. See that device you're holding in your hand? How old are you? 36. I'm 44. You know what my phone was when I was 44 in New York? My mother would open the window. Hey, it's time to come in. We had house phones with rotaries. What has made us, there's people that can't even leave their house without that shit now. Because what I'm saying, it's so easy to introduce the concept and you become dependent on it. Now people act like they can't function without their cell phone. Because technology has dictated that if you don't have one of those, you're not connected no more. That's not true. Because when this brother called me today, it was connection here, that's all it was. Something spiked his mind just to call me, and then when he said one word, the 7th of June, that triggered everything else. They've set up systems. We never were dependent on that. Before that, what did we have? It was what? We had a beeper, and I'm telling our age. We had a beeper. Two sky, 2 babies. All right. Then it was that. Then we didn't have a beeper. We didn't have this. We had a house phone. If you wanted to talk to somebody, you called somebody in your house, or you went there to go physically. Go ahead.
My question is technology something negative?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I'll say yes because it's opened up the technological informational age. Like I heard several people say before, we have access to information we wouldn't have had access to 15, 20, 25 years ago. Now we have a bunch of Google scholars running around. Because now you can just type something in on Wikipedia and Google, and now everybody knows everything. So it has its benefits. It's opened up a broader spectrum to information and knowledge, good and bad. Here's the bad part though.
But technology doesn't just mean computer.
No, right. Now here's the bad part. Correct. Here's the bad part. From a spiritual level, it's cut off people's creativity. I'm going to tell you why. The generation coming up now don't have imaginations no more. When we were kids, there was such a thing as go outside and play. That doesn't mean anything no more. Now, you know me, I've been back and forth from New York for years. Just came back 2 years ago. I go home, I don't see kids playing on the street no more like they used to. I go to my neighborhood in Queens, they're not running the streets. Nobody's playing stickball, basketball. You want to know why?
Well, could it be a different mindset?
You see that?
Could it be a different mindset?
No, but what I'm trying to tell you is the mindset has changed because when we were gods and we were creative, what did we do as kids? We could take the pots and the pans, and now we're drummers, right?
But I'm saying, so these kids are not gods and created them.
No, they are. Some are. That's not true. Let me start back here, and then we're going to come up. We would do things like, and I'm sure they did it down here, we would take a milk crate and make a basketball hoop, right? We would invent games like box ball, right? Stoop ball, right? I'm dating myself. Ring Alivio. Some people may not know what that is. Run, catch, and kiss. We had the other game where we'd set up like Indian fort. Say it again.
Skillsy.
There you go, Skillsy. Running bases, hopscotch. Remember all these games that we created? Jacks, right? I can go on and on and on. Now, from a creative standpoint, we become intellectualized robots. This is one aspect. I'm going to get to your point. So now these kids want to just sit at home and play video games. They want to be on Facebook and social media. The dumbest shit I find is people basically have opened themselves up to come rob me. Just bought the 52 widescreen TV and they posted on Facebook. On a vacation in the Caribbean. If I'm a real professional thug, now I know your shit is vacated, and you just announced you got the 52-inch flat screen and you're lounging somewhere in the Caribbean, you've just sent me an invitation to rob you. Creativity. It's clouding our thinking. That's the downside. Not talking about how it's intellectualized us, because you can take artificial intelligence and clone and raise that same intellect up to the same speed. Now, it doesn't mean that the kids are not gods, because that natural nature is there. Remember I said earlier, these kids are warriors. So by birth, they are gods. But they are being influenced by this artificial technology. That's my point. Okay? You have to go. We're going to finish up, and then, yeah, go ahead. What do you want to say?
No, I was just saying I have to learn that.
Sure. You have to go. You go right out there.
Emphasize what he said, right? My stepdaughter, we were doing an exercise in the house where we found out another brother texted me and told me that one day on Venus was like 240 years on Earth. Right? So it sparked some numbers because I'm in the so it sparked a lot of numbers going around. So I gave him an equation. I said, all right, well, how much is 15 minutes on Venus?
Right.
On Earth, a day. Now, what happened was people had to try to pull out their old, high school arithmetic or whatever to try to figure this out. But the younger, the 16, 15, 16-year-old, I was like, well, what's the process? What's the critical thinking process to come to how you gonna solve this problem? So because for me, I'm looking at if I said 15 minutes, that's a quarter of an hour.
Right.
So I looked at the clock face and I saw quarter of an hour. Because I'm still analog and digital.
There you go.
And I'm watching them for hours, busting their heads against the wall, and they never could find that starting point. And when I analyzed them and questioned them, I found out they don't see the clock face.
Right.
They see the digital numbers.
That's right.
So it never got the clue
That's right.
on where to start.
That's right. Brother Paulo.
That's why when you go to McDonald's, they don't know how to make change.
It's crazy.
The register
That's
has
right.
pictures on it.
Yeah.
And he does it all for him.
They don't know how to make change.
It does it.
So talking about how to much,
It's really killing mental.
Well, you know what? To your point, do you ever see this shit makes me laugh. To show you again, to verify the points we're saying. Do you ever watch somebody? I do this all the time intentionally, just to see where they are. Do you ever order something at the register, retail, restaurant, whatever? Could be like where you said McDonald's or whatever. It comes out to 10:04, right? They go pop in 10. You go, wait, hold on, I got the 4 cents. Because they've depended on the numbers, they're completely baffled. Now the average, like Tiger said, the average basic person just knows basic math. Should be able to go, all right, you gave me the 4 cents. Originally I was going to give you $3.96 back. Now I just know to give you $4. But they're like stumped. They're like, wait a minute. And they're grabbing the chains, they're counting, they're completely confused. That's what I'm trying to say. All this technology has cut off our creativity and thinking. Here's another one. And we talked about this, me and you, a while back. You seen this new movie out with Steve Jobs. But what did Steve Jobs do? And all this technology that he invented, what was one requirement that he made sure it was enforced? He didn't let his kids use the shit. Let me say that aloud again. This is the guy that, as a billionaire, off of inventing this technology, but why he doesn't want his kids? Because he knows they can become computerized and programmed by this technology. This is the guy that's made billions of dollars off of this, but he didn't let his kids use it. I'm trying to say it has its ups and its downs because it's crazy. It's crazy. So that speaks to me volumes. When I read that and we were talking about it and I went and researched Steve Jobs, I didn't know that. And I said, wow, that statement, that action, I should say, not statement, speaks volumes. I don't need it. I mean, that right there says it all. But here's a guy that said, but I'll take that concept and I'll make $1 billion off it to everybody else.
But what we got to realize, most of these guys who make all these billions, they never did it with the intent for money. They had a vision. All they did was create the vision, and the vision made the money on the side.
That's correct. That's correct.
That was never his intent to make all those billions.
Well, this is why I'm saying,
Manifested.
correct. Once you open yourself up, then, like I say, when I say, you know the old saying, there's an old saying in alchemy, and I don't think a lot of people understand what it means. It's not spooky. The old saying of do without doing. I don't think people understand what that means. When I was younger in my teens and 20s and I was first studying consciousness, that used to baffle me. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Do without doing. It doesn't mean be stagnated and don't do anything. You want to elaborate? Go ahead.
I believe, I don't know. I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
To me, it means you got to be this thing. You can't, if you're doing it or trying it, you're lying.
That's exactly what it means to me.
Align yourself.
That's exactly what it means to me.
You have tools to align yourself.
That's right.
And once you start getting the more alignment you get, you'll see your God power manifest.
Right. And that's why I struggled with when I was younger, because I was focused in the action of doing. Like, I'm like, what do you mean? You know, you got to do. And I was more focused on that part of it, and I didn't understand. But now, as I study alchemy in I won't say I'm old, but I'm getting up there. Now I'm starting to realize that that's an impactful statement. But it took me back to that point in my life where now my spirits are telling me, okay, so this is what it meant. You needed to go through all that to get to here to see what you already knew anyway, but you were looking on the mundane surface. So it can be damaged. But anyway, I think I'm going to stop there. If anybody has any questions, I'm not going to talk on anything else.
It's like the GPS. Some people can't do without it.
Right. But you know, with me, here's the thing that I find ironic here. I'm the type of person, if I do something one time, I never forget it.
Yeah.
This is the computer I need. If I go somewhere one time, I don't use a GPS. If I Google it, I scan the lines, it's in my head. And now I have a visual Google in here. And I'm driving and I go there one time. I cannot go there for 2-3 years. I can remember how to get there. To me, Florida is you cannot get lost in the state of Florida. It's on a north to south grid. I'm not talking about what's in between east to west. But if you know the north to south grid and you do get misplaced, it's easy to get right back to where you need to go. No. Oh, I've been to Hialeah. Oh, no, I've been to Hialeah. 36th Street. I'm down there frequently because we deliver down there, the company I work for. I'm in Hialeah all the time. June Road, I'm down there all the time. But what I'm saying is, though, you know it's on a north to south grid.
Some people don't know east from west.
Right, but what? You know 595 is the east to west grid. The Turnpike is the west north to south grid, and 95 is the east north to south grid. That's all you need to know. So when in doubt, if you get mixed up nowhere, find one of those, and all you gotta do is get back on. You're gonna end up where you need to be. No, yeah. So, but what I'm saying is, when you have that working for you, like I go somewhere one time. Now I can go there and go 3 years later. I'll remember how to get there. That's just how I am with directions.
One last thing I want to add. What he said in terms of placement on the planet, right, is important. and it's going to become more important going forward because, for instance, they'll tell you, he and I are both from New York originally, for instance, so-called. New York is on East Coast time.
Right.
We're on East Coast time, Atlanta's on East Coast time. Right? Everybody agree?
Yep.
Right? They're 3 different times, but they'll tell you it's one. So you're going to need to, if you want to get into higher level understanding about yourself and where you are on the planet and how you manifest from this spot, you got to know where you're at.
That's right.
And they've got you confounded in other systems, from the monetary to the time to even your location. This is not whatever Miami Gardens.
Right.
If you co-sign to that, you're under that jurisdiction. You're
That's
under
right.
it.
That's right.
You know, so you gotta realize where you are. New York time. Why are New Yorkers usually quick? Because right now New York is ahead. New York is 20 minutes
That's correct.
ahead
Of where we're at right
of
now.
where we're at right
That's
now.
right.
We're very balanced here right now. That's why you got Coral Castle, you got certain things, because there's vortexes here.
That's correct.
Atlanta got other things going on. All the times are different, but they got you on some simplified shit.
You know what I want to even run by? We'll talk about that. Where Lake Worth is in Palm Beach County, running along Lake Worth, Florida, into North Broward County, there's a serious energy grid there. We'll get to that one another time. But that's important to know where you're at, because he's talking about ley lines and grids, and those are activation centers. Now, we always talked about anytime cataclysmic disaster struck, we always knew where to go based on where we were at. Do you understand? And then we will always re-emerge after those cataclysmic periods and replenish the earth. We did this, and we're going to have to do it again. All right? So if that being said, if nobody has any other questions, I think we're going to close. And just to run this by you, we're here. There's plenty of books here, products. Definitely take a look here. There's plenty of stuff here. I know it's a little wet, but we'll open this back up. We have it covered. So if you definitely need to see something here, do that. What we would like to do real quick for 5 minutes, I call it libation to the spirits. I always open and close with that. That's just something I didn't do in the past over the years, but I do it now because it's something that came to me communicated out of respect that always has to be done. So we're going to close just basically the way we started, with a very short, several minute session. We're going to close out with that. So if somebody wants to take, if you have your little thing, let's close out with that on that vibration. And then we can socialize for a short period and call it a night. Which one are we going to start, brother? That one? Go ahead, man. I'm ready.
Let's be up. All right.
it. Peace. Thank everybody for coming. And guess we'll get with Brother Yahuda on the next one.